they sort of just eke out a living and live in peace.
Yeah, and pray to weird evil gods.
And pray to weird evil gods, yeah.
I'm sure the black goat of Qohor is probably just misunderstood.
It's grossly misunderstood.
Yeah, he's just a big cuddly guy.
It's just a teddy bear. It demands the occasional baby. Hey there, and welcome to the Vassals of Kingsgrave. This podcast is part of a special series of in-depth discussions on the various sections of The World of Ice and Fire, which is a new compendium written by George R.R. Martin, Elio Garcia, and Linda Antonsson. In this episode, we will be exploring all of the weird and wonderful places beyond the shores of Westeros. Originally, we were going to try and cover everything in one episode, but I think we've decided that there is way too much. So this installment will just cover the Free Cities, and then part 2 will sort of get into the Dothraki grasslands and the Shivering Sea and the Bones and all the lands up to Ashai by the Shadow. So my name is Duncan, or Valkyrist on the forums, and joining me today is Thomas.
Hi, Thomas, FTWard on the forums.
Patrick.
Hey, Patrick. Patrick the Tall on the forums.
Dan.
Hi, this is Dan. I'm witless chum on the forums.
Augustine.
So y'all, this is Augustine and Linecom 1 on the forums.
And Michael.
Hey, this is Michael. I am Khal Wadege on the forums.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on, guys. So, yeah, as I said, Essos is going to be the main focus of this segment. And I thought maybe just to start the conversation, maybe we could talk a bit about our impressions of Essos from the books, just reading through the original A Song of Ice and Fire novels. Just, I guess for me, Essos has really been a very strange place, like unlike Westeros, which feels much more developed and gritty and realistic in like a historical sense. Essos feels sort of more magical and mysterious and much more difficult to grasp. So maybe just quickly go around the group and talk a bit about, just I guess your thoughts on Essos and how it's maybe developed in your mind.
Well, I think I started with thinking that every city, maybe except for Pentos and Braavos, had like colored beards and everything like that. I couldn't really distinguish between the different free cities and which cities had colored beards and which did not. So that was a bit of a problem. But other than that, I think it reminded me a lot of the remnants of the Roman Empire. If you wanted to draw parallels to real history. So I kind of had a grasp on what it was in a sense.
Yeah,
some of the cities kind of melded together, so I couldn't really distinguish between those two. Yeah, but otherwise,
I think
not so.
Part of it for me was like for the first 3 books, we only got Daenerys' perspective of Essos, and she is quite a young girl, so it all feels a bit. At least the first 2 books felt very, just fantastical and dreamlike, especially like Qarth just seems like this weird dream city with like ghost tortoises and the House of the Undying and all that. Just, I don't know, it's like a stark contrast to everything that we see in Westeros. But I guess in book 5, it does start to take a bit more shape as we get people like John Connington and Victarion and Tyrion come in, and you sort of start to see the workings of the society a bit more. Anyone else, Michael?
When I first started reading it, I got the impression that Essos was almost a backwater, and that like Westeros was where things are, and that's the main stuff. But as I read, The Lands of Ice and Fire and this book, The World of Ice and Fire, you really realize that Westeros is the backwater and Essos is where it's at. They've got big developed cities, they've got mass production, they've got everything.
Yeah, and they've got sort of the inklings of democracy. You start to see this sort of more mercantile class and magisters running affairs rather than just this hereditary kind of line of kings that just can't get things together.
Yeah, Westeros really is the land of the savages in steel armor.
Yeah, senseless savage land. Augustine?
When I was reading the main novels, you kind of get a sense, and I think speaking as an American, that Westeros comes off as kind of like the New World, and Essos comes off as an amalgamation of Europe and Asia, and like Patrick was saying, like the Summer Sea, you can see how George modeled the Summer Sea and the areas around it, similar to the Mediterranean Sea, and the historical nations and empires that existed around that. So yeah, that's the impression I had.
Yeah, it's sort of like the cradle of civilization almost. Like a lot of Westeros kind of lives in the shadow of this great empires like Valeria, but they're very much seen as things in decline and decay, and they've fallen away. And Essos is just kind of chaos now in the eyes of Westeros. They see the Westerosi see themselves more as the new world.
Yeah, but see, I never saw saw Westeros as being the new world in a sense. I always completely just made a link between England and Westeros all the way through. And you might actually say that at that time with the Roman Empire, England might have been like sort of like the new land, because you had like it was kind of after Romans left, it was kind of devout of any kind of sort of civilization, and then there came influxes from different parts of Europe. So yeah, I guess I can see how it is sort of like that, but I always made a direct link between England and Westeros, and therefore I didn't really think of it as a new world, you know?
Yeah, that's true. Culturally, it's still very much stuck in its way, but I guess I mean more just in the terms of it being like a unified realm, as opposed to Essos is very fractured and scattered and constantly squabbling with each other. But I guess it carries on that kind of Valerian lineage of dragons kind of binding everything up into a single centralized idea of a country.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I always saw Westeros as, Western Europe, and Essos is a series of city-states mostly. I didn't realize how many empires had risen and fallen until A Dance with Dragons, really. But and then this book, The World of Ice and Fire.
Yeah, I agree. I think to me it was really Tyrion's journey in Dance with Dragons, where he's traveling along the Rhine, and I think that's what really started to open my eyes on the depth of the history that this land has all these these majestic and complex cities that are now in ruins, and that's how old this place was. So that really sparked my interest as a fan of this series, and what else is going on in Essos, what's the history of Essos like. So I was really excited to get The World of Ice and Fire, and the first thing I jumped right to was all the sections regarding Essos. I was really excited to read it.
Yeah, and sort of speaking of Tyrion's journey down the Rhine, that's kind of the first image we get of the Beyond the Sunset Kingdoms, this image of, I think it's Choirain. It's this mist-enshrouded ruin that Tyrion passes through on his way to Volantis, and I think this is the place that's ruled over by the Shrouded Lord and his stone men. And it was once like a splendid Rhoynar city that was just decimated by dragon fire.
Yeah, the festival city.
As far as on the general impressions, it sounds like I kind of came at it a lot different than most of you guys did. I remember from reading the first two books, like, not having any kind of impression of Essos as much different than Westeros as far as like the depth of the story. Like I remember in the Dany chapters in Clash where where she's talking to Zarozan Daxos, and hearing about like these little snippets, and he's like, oh, we should go to ET, and talking about the Jade Sea and all this stuff. I just remember that all being really like evocative, and like hearing it and sounding like, wow, I wonder what the Jade, what's around the Jade Sea, what's ET? I guess it must be China, that kind of things like that. So I guess maybe I had a more positive impression of Essos, or a more positive impression of Martin's writing about Essos from the beginning.
And it's weird. It's sort of, when you hear those snippets of places in the early books, they seem much smaller than they actually are. It's kind of like the reverse, where Khal Drogo thinks of Westeros as this little collection of islands out in the middle of the sea. Same thing with like ET and these places. They just seem like these far off places. I thought it was just an island or something, a little island. But it turns out it's this enormous golden kingdom that dwarfs anything in Westeros.
I guess I don't put a lot of stock into what Khal Drogo thinks myself.
What?
Maester Drogo.
I think to answer your point, Dan, about maybe some of us having a bit of a negative view of Essos on our first impression. I think, speaking for myself, I think part of that came, from the fact that there were stark differences between the cultures. So, for example, slavery existed in Essos, and it didn't exist in Westeros. And obviously, the main protagonists were in Westeros. So that's what the story is about, and that's what we care about. So you automatically have this, this sense of Westeros being home and Essos being, these dirty foreigners.
I guess my negative feelings came from the whole them being like cities sprung up from the Valerian Empire, and the Valerians being, well, connected to the Targaryens, and the Targaryens being crazy. At that point, I didn't have a very nuanced view of the Targaryens because George hadn't given us one. So I guess I just connected it to being like, well, it's just remnants of this giant empire of cruel slavers and dragon riders.
Yeah, I agree. The slavery thing was a big sort of red flag. It's like, oh, these people, they must be regressive somehow if they still have slavery. Because at least if there's one good thing about Westeros, it doesn't support slavery in most forms, I guess. Although Tyrion kind of makes the point that, you know, a lot of the servants are basically slaves in Westeros.
Right.
Yeah, that was kind of how I always, I didn't have as strong a reaction to, oh, they're slavers, because, we've already seen what people in Westeros are like. So, there's really not that much difference.
And it seems like a place of exile. Like, if something goes wrong for anyone in Westeros, they run away to Essos. Like, Jorah Mormont gets caught as a slaver, so he runs away. So it seems like this sort of barren, marginalized place.
Yeah, places where everyone's trying to get back into Westeros.
Like the Blackfires, yeah.
Yeah, that's really just from the impression of all the Westerosi, I guess, that we see.
Cool.
Sure.
Do we want to move on to the Free Cities?
Sounds good.
Sure.
Cool. So the Free Cities are the closest neighbors to the Seven Kingdoms. They're all along the western coasts of Essos. They all have their own history and language. They all pretty much derive from the Valyrian freehold. There were 8 that were ruled by Valyria up until the Doom. Valyrian blood is still highly regarded in all the cities, while the 9th, Braavos, was founded against the expansion by slaves. And Yandel seems to consider it the best city. But before we sort of go into the cities one by one, Maester Yandel makes a point about the difficulty of dates, sort of conflicting accounts of what constitutes a season or a year or a day in different parts of the world. I don't know. I thought maybe that had something to do with the crazy sort of weather scheme of the winter and all that. I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
My thought was that's George not wanting to be pinned down too much. I mean, that's always been one of his things. Like, well, it was a while, but not that long. There's a lot of that in the So Spake Martin thing on Westeros.
Yeah, I think Elio and Linda sort of pressed him if he wanted to give out some of the days of the week or the months of the year or whatever, and he said, "No, not going to do it. Not going to pin myself down. Give any kind of metric of measurement." Like, he even sort of regretted telling people how long the war was, because then they could use that to measure distance.
A ruler.
Yeah. So he doesn't like to give too much specifics about the world.
I know. I always kind of wondered, like, how people could tell when their name day was, because obviously, seasons can, winter can last several years. So it's like, how do they know when their name day comes again? But obviously, he's not going to reveal that.
Well, I think they have a lunar.
Changing of the stars, and that's what
they go by moon turns, right? So that would be like a 28-day cycle. Or a 12, I think it'd be like a 12-month, 30-day cycle is kind of what I figure. But again, you really can't pin that down, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I just assume it's a similar sort of year to our own years.
Yeah, it has to be, because pregnancies last 9 months rather.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
But it's a fantasy world. Women could be pregnant for 14 months there.
Although that's
be pregnant for 14 months here.
I don't think it's said that there's 12 months in a year, so that maybe there's like 15 months in a year or something, and then people aren't as old as they think they are or something. I don't know. Like, that's why they die so young.
That's why Rob can lead armies at 14. He's really 30.
Maybe.
But then again, how about Aemon then, being almost 100 years?
He's got that good Targaryen blood.
Yeah, super good.
Yeah, I mean, unless we're told that it's different, I think you just assume that it's the same to be real.
Again, women have their cycles. I think it's 30 every 30 days, a moon blood cycle. So I wouldn't get too hung up on it. I've given it quite a bit of thought, probably more than is necessary. But
sure sounds like
it. I tried to make a role-playing game once upon a time in Westeros. So I kind of tried to figure out days and months and all that stuff.
I remember being surprised. I think it's in one of Rob's last chapters where he's talking about the New Year, and I was like, "Oh, they have dates like that," because that was the day he was supposed to attack Moat Cailin, I think.
The day that
and all the Ironborn would be drinking and stuff. Yeah.
Well, I guess every culture on Earth has like a New Year of some sort.
Another point was that there doesn't seem to be like an eastern parallel to the Citadel. Is there something like that? Have you guys come across that, like a sort of center of learning or a university in Essos? I don't know. Might be in individual cities or something like Braavos, but
Well, other than on Essos specifically, or just beyond the narrow sea.
Just beyond the narrow sea, something equivalent to the Citadel.
You could say that Shy Under the Shadow is sort of a place of learning.
That's one way of putting it.
Satan University.
Yeah.
I always kind of assume, like, in Westeros, Maesters serve the role as doctors and scientists and, political advisors. And I always just sort of had the impression that in Essos, it was a little bit more specialized. So there wasn't this, one-stop shop of, this order of Maesters who just do everything. There's like a separate guy you go to if you're sick. There's a separate one you go to if you want to know, if you want to go to school.
Braavos has a hospital, I believe, like the House of Striped, something striped.
Isn't it the Red Hand or something like that, actually? But yeah, no, I haven't come across anything as far as like a center of learning anywhere in Essos or anything. I guess I want to say maybe some other podcast I heard where they were talking about that, and they basically came to the conclusion that we're just supposed to think that the rich have tutors, and that's the sum total of education in Essos, which is probably not.
Because that seems to be the cultural thing, that various people will be given that roles based on their upbringing or whatever. If they adapt to it, they'll do it, but it's more in service to the culture or the king or whatever. Whereas the Citadel is like specifically a university will go to educate themselves. And I'm wondering if that's another thing that maybe the Westerosi hold themselves up as being somehow more civilized.
Well, I'd be curious to ask you guys, whichever one of you has a good amount of historical knowledge. During the period after the Roman Empire fell, and when the medieval ages, I guess, began historically in our world, like who served that role of the Maesters in our past in Western Europe?
Monks, various religious orders.
The religious orders. Yeah, mostly.
Yeah, there's that sort of shady book that came out a few years ago called How the Irish Saved Civilization.
Yeah.
That's
I remember that.
That's basically the idea is that monks, sort of preserved a lot of the classical learning and things like that. And, it's shady because it's only true if you ignore all sorts of other things. But, it's a catchy title. Good for
So monks were teachers and doctors and scientists. They were all those things?
Yeah, most. There was monasteries where they did cultivate knowledge and learning. But I would say actually mostly, if you want to have a place where most of the learning were concentrated, you want to go to the east instead, like Byzantine
India.
Empire or just Persia, stuff like that.
I guess monks would have that kind of institutional structure where they could have libraries and be able to pass knowledge down from teacher to apprentice and things like that, preserve that kind of knowledge, so it makes sense.
Also, during the Dark Ages or the medieval ages, I mean, it was the Middle Eastern and, Arabic, Persian, like, civilizations that sort of carried the torch, like, for historical and intellectual information, while the rest of Western Europe really didn't focus on knowledge as much. So maybe that same thing is happening here in Essos, where, if Essos is a representation of, say, the Middle East or parts of, Northern Africa or Asia, this is where, it's sort of going on, but we aren't really sure exactly how they're doing it, but we know it's going on.
Yeah, like Braavos, it's especially hard to believe that there's not some sort of, equivalent to a university there that, lots of people would go to and, get the know-how they would need to design ships at the arsenal, for instance, or, because Braavos is, has that kind of, technological stuff. Although, maybe I'm getting ahead and I'm not supposed to talk about Braavos yet.
Although that's a good point. Like a lot of these societies are far more insulated. They probably actually possess a lot of very valuable knowledge, but they keep it to themselves, like Braavos and Qohor. The Citadel actually offers it to everyone, but its knowledge is seen as far more powerful to a lot of these civilizations in terms of advancement.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I agree, and I really think that if you want to draw a parallel, at least with Braavos, you just take Venice more or less, and how they did it. It was more or less you had guilds that preserved the knowledge and taught it on to new artisans, and it's pretty much what I imagine here in this world as well. That you have the specific organizations that keep the knowledge within the certain cities, and these organizations are taking care of training new people and developing knowledges and new techniques and stuff like that. That seems like the medieval way.
Okay, well, let's look at some of the individual cities. So we could sort of lump the first three together because they have sort of similar histories. And we've got Lorath at the very northern tip of the Free Cities. It's considered the poorest. It rests in a small bay. It's on an island. Shares borders with the Ibbenese whalers. Relies heavily on sea life to make a living. And what did you guys think of Lorath? Probably the least mentioned city in the whole series.
Yeah, certainly. Like, they always mention one of the Free Cities is known for exporting colors or cloth, but Lorath does nothing. Like, you look at its main exports, like walrus tusks and whale blubber and shit like that. It's like, yeah, no wonder you're poor.
Oh, but their greatest, contribution to A Song of Ice and Fire has got to be, a man could do this thing, a man could do this thing. And the Jake and Hagar way of speaking.
Oh, that makes sense now. Oh my god, because he's from Lorath and
Right.
yeah.
There's I think it's one of the little side. They mention it somewhere that comes from the priests that founded Lorath. That you were supposed to not even talk about yourself. Like, you're supposed to not even have a self. So that's where that way of talking came from.
Yes,
I've got the book open, trying to find it here.
So essentially,
and thing, but yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. I didn't realize that either. I knew Jack and Hagar claimed it came from Lorath, but I didn't connect the way he spoke. But so essentially, it's an ancient city, and we don't know who built it. It might have been Andal's, it might have been Ibbenese, and eventually it was wiped out by the Valerians because they tried to attack Norvos, which was one of the freeholds of Valeria. And then the Valerians called in an air raid, destroyed everyone, and then it was eventually colonized by a bunch of Valerian religious people. Pilgrims of some kind, or maybe even exiles, and they were. Does it describe what their religion was called?
They were called they worshipped Boash, the blind god. It says, rejecting all other deities, and the followers of Boash ate no flesh, drank no wine, and walked barefoot through the world, clad only in hair shirts and hides. Their eunuch priests wore eyeless hoods in honor of their god. Only in darkness, they believed, could the third eye open, allowing them to see the higher truths of creation. And all life was sacred and equal. Men and women are equal. Lords and peasants, rich and poor, slave and master, etc., etc. So they're kind of like A Song of Ice and Fire's Cathars, I think.
What's Cathars?
They were a Christian sect that became real powerful in southern France in the I want to say the 1100s. And what do you think the institutional Catholic Church thought about that? They thought crusading time.
They weren't fine with it?
And they slaughtered. No.
How unlike.
They slaughtered.
Yeah, I got the impression. I mean, I may not be as knowledgeable on the history of religion, but I got the impression that the blind god was kind of like the Essos version of Buddhism.
Yeah, that's
because
what I thought.
Of just the self-abnegation and the third eye, and there's sort of minimalization of material things.
So I guess I found it interesting. I guess a few things here. I kind of thought that the Lorathi speech thing was kind of retconned in, where I didn't really think it made a ton of sense. It felt like that, like to me anyway, that they just kind of stuck that in there when it really wasn't true beforehand. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone else, but
I wouldn't be shocked.
Because Jake and Hagar, I guess if he lived in the village or whatever, but Jake and Hagar seems to be worshipped Relor, if anything, if not, the many-faced god of the faceless men. So it just seemed, the whole thing seemed a little fishy to me. I mean, it's not a big deal or anything, but I never bought that.
I was sort of wondering if maybe the blind god somehow influenced the faceless god, like they might have been part of the same thing originally, because I don't know, the idea of removing the self and just taking on various vessels and using your body as like an instrument.
Well, I thought the third eye was interesting in regards to like Bran and the three-eyed raven. I mean, that might just be a universal kind of symbol, but I found that kind of interesting also.
Yeah, it does have like Buddhist tones to it, like opening, like foregoing earthly things and opening yourself up to enlightenment or the sort of spiritual realm or something.
Well, the thing with Jaken too is you got to remember that he may or may not really be Lorathi. Maybe he's just playing Lorathi there at that part where Arya meets him. So it's very hard to tell anything from him, I think.
Yeah, I guess you would think anyone who has any knowledge of the free cities, like, wouldn't they pick up on the fact that just based on the way he talks, this guy's probably Lorathi? You know what I mean? Like, he's the only one out of everyone.
Well, the
referring to
speech
himself in
pattern.
the third person.
I mean, the blind god religion basically died like hundreds of years ago. I think Yandel more makes the point that some of the speech pattern have pervaded to this day, but I don't think they're necessarily tied to Lorath. They're just kind of a thing that some people say around that region. So it might be in Qohor and Norvos as well. Just like a northern Essos kind of tick, I guess.
I think it's supposed to be just Lorath. I've got the thing in front of me right here. He says, even though the cult died 1,000 years ago, certain of these habits of speech endure even now in Lorath, where men and women of the noble classes regarded as unutterably vulgar to speak of oneself directly.
Oh, okay. So maybe Jackin's a noble. But as you say,
he's just been trained.
He could just be wearing a mask, just another,
One thing I didn't really like, one thing that jumped out in my mind when I was reading the Lorath section was, how the hell did the Lorathi never figure out where Braavos was when Braavos was a secret city? Like, they're right next to him. You know what I mean? How did they not discover them earlier? Like, how did they get away with hiding themselves so easily when they're right next to Lorath?
I don't think they're right next to each other, and the Lorathi seem to be pretty limited in their reach.
Yeah, it's described as this walled off lagoon, isn't it? So it's completely rocks all the way around, and for a long time it was just this barren bit of water. So maybe the Lorathi don't even bother going there, but it might be, or else it might be just so far away that they would never accidentally pass it. But I think eventually the Braavos start trading with the Lorathi and a few other cities. It's more
but in order for the Lorathi to access the narrow sea, they have to pass Braavos, don't they?
I'm looking they have to pass it, but
it's.
But I got the impression that people traded with Lorath, vice versa.
Well, they probably didn't put up the Titan until later.
Yeah, it's the first thing they built.
I hope it was.
We've wasted all our money and resources on this statue.
But it was awesome.
It looks great.
Totally worth it.
The other interesting thing is this mysterious order, which seems to date back to the ancient time when the original inhabitants of Lorath were alive, called the Maze Makers, and they basically constructed the cities like giant mazes.
Are these made of the black, oily stone?
I don't know, but
no, it doesn't. It doesn't describe it as black and oily. It just says, I think it just says dark.
But I thought that was so interesting that they would make mazes, and I was wondering if that was sort of a defense thing, like if people attack them, they could fall back into the city and they would know the outcome of the layout of the maze, but their enemies wouldn't.
Yeah, that was one theory I saw on Tumblr. I want to say it was I can't think of the name of the blog right now, but they talked about thinking maybe the maze makers and then the people, the Cthulhu worshippers with the oily black stone were possibly two competing groups fighting each other in ancient times. And that's what we were supposed to, sort of figure out from that. But, that's pretty,
really
pretty conjecture-y.
Yeah.
We keep getting these references to the deep ones or the fish people that various civilizations seem to be terrified of. The Lorathi seem to be pretty well placed to maybe have encountered them, so that's a possible reason for building the mazes.
Well, don't they say that they found giant skeletons or not giant, I guess, but extremely large human skeletons?
Yeah.
In the mazes?
Yeah, it says they were larger than men, but not as large as giants, it says.
Yeah. And they don't seem to have horns, so I don't think they were like actual minotaurs or something, but they seem to be a separate race.
Yeah, I put minotaurs in there because that was didn't they build labyrinths to keep the minotaurs in there and then throw people in?
Yeah,
I think it was.
God, I can't remember. I played the dude that got thrown in with the Minotaur at school.
Well, you should know.
Oh, but wasn't the Minotaur a prince or something that was because he was of course production between a man and a bull. He got thrown in there or lived in there and he grew savage after a while, and then then the whole story that you're talking about unfolded. But he was supposed to be noble birth, actually, or a bastard of a noble.
Why are we talking about the Minotaur? I don't understand how that came up.
I just
the Minotaurs in this maze. Oh, Theseus and the Minotaur. That's it.
Yeah. It's a myth that a maze was built and a Minotaur was placed in it. It's all right. It's just crazy speculation.
Yeah.
It's
go back.
giant maze kind of fantasy world. I just thought it was, it was in the show notes too. But,
Sure.
Did anyone else connect the maze with the hedge maze that's in front of Highgarden? That's the first thing I thought of. Is I wonder if there's a relationship between that and I can't remember what the history of the World of Ice and Fire section about Highgarden is, but it made me at least think about the fact that like that was the only place in Westeros that has this big elaborate maze as part of the defense. And when I saw this, I wonder if there's any connection. But
I just assumed the Tyrells are Ponzi. They're like, ooh, a maze will keep people out. A maze of heads. They totally about that.
Yeah, well,
it's supposed to be all thorny and stuff, right?
It's a good. It is a good. You can see why the blind men probably were attracted to it. Like the idea of walking through a maze without eyes. I don't know, as a path to enlightenment or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, somebody put on the show notes here. Found Valeria's religious tolerance intolerable.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which I thought that was a good line too, because I mean that that's sort of the history of the founding of New England, where the so-called pilgrims were living in Holland so they could practice their religion freely, but they didn't like having to practice it around all these other people who weren't their religion. So they came to the United States for religious freedom, so called, but it was really the religious freedom to force everybody around to be your religion.
Yeah, they wanted to persecute them, and the Valerians wouldn't let them. Well, the Valerians are funny because they're so sort of lofty. They think of themselves as gods that they don't even care about religious people. It's all just fun and games to them. They see themselves as the ultimate power.
Yeah,
and I think they also make the point that the Valerians would use religion basically to placate the masses and keep them divided and disorganized. And
yeah, if you had a million different religions, they can't have one to get behind.
Which is what Westeros probably do, because they've got this one powerful religion and it keeps rising up in revolt and galvanizing all the small folk against the aristocrats. So they should try and support the old gods and the the drown god and the Rhoynar gods. Get them into the mainstream.
Like the Valyrian stance on religion was just sort of a reminder of the way the Roman Empire viewed religion. Obviously, the Roman Empire started off with its own religion, but as it became more and more of an empire, they became more and more tolerant of different cultures and religions, because really that was the best way to implement several different types of people who come from several different backgrounds. Ultimately, as long as people are paying taxes to Rome, that's all they cared about, which is what I think sort of was reflected in the Valyrian philosophy as well.
Yeah, all they cared about in the end was the wealth and the power. The religion took a backseat. Yeah.
Who wrote Dwarves Ahoy, and what do they mean by it?
Yeah, what did...
Aren't the Ibbenese supposed to be dwarves?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. They're short and hairy, and they carry axes.
So who wrote that?
I did. I just wrote it.
Okay.
Because I just thought they were dwarves, so I just threw that in. I didn't have anything else, anything actually intelligent to say.
But the Ibbenese are not
Alright.
right? They're not related at all to them.
No.
Well, no,
It just
originally...
started, I think.
Well, no, I mean, Yandel speculates that the city may have originally been built by the Ibbenese. That's all. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yep.
But the Yandels would have gotten rid of all of them, and then the Valerians got rid of the Yandels.
Yeah, eventually the Yandels took over, and then they got so high and mighty they attacked Norvos, and then the Valerians wiped them out.
Well, should we move on to Norvos then? And which one? Norvos is the bearded priest, right?
Yeah, it's situated on the northern banks of the Noin. Its upper city is on bluffs. It's where the nobles live. It's dominated by a fortress run by the bearded priests, so it's very much a theocracy. And the lower city is where the common folk live, and it's in the mud, and it's connected by a strip of stone.
Yeah, if I look at my Lands of Ice and Fire map open here, it looks like Lorath to Norvos is about the same distance as Braavos to Lorath, but there's no like Valerian road or anything, so it's not clear like how easy it is to travel between the two.
I imagine they would be. They're all part of the freehold.
We can take the river north almost to the sea, it looks like.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. It's probably faster. It's described as having lots of wolves and bears, very windswept. And it's interesting how it almost resembles more the Riverlands in the north than all of the other places, all the other free cities, which are far more exotic and temperate and more like the Dornish, I guess.
Yeah, I think it is pretty much equal to the Riverlands. We can look at it in the big map. Is this a place where the women shave their heads?
Yes.
And they wear... Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So, what god do they? I don't remember which god they.
I don't think
They-
it's allowed to be named. Yeah,
Yeah.
but the bearded priests worship it, and they take
Okay.
slaves and train slave boys to be warriors. And that's where we get Areo Hotar, who's the only Norvosi we come across in the proper novels. And he's basically just a robot who's been trained by the bearded priest. He has like vague memories of his family and his mother dancing in the snow. But basically, once he got his axe, he married it, and then he just became a warrior, this robotic servant.
I just have to say, I love the picture with the evil war bear in the book.
With its red eyes.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Scary.
Yeah.
serious. I love it. It's very. I get this like feeling of like a Siberian monastery of some sort.
They have those in Denmark. Weird
No,
monasteries
the problem
of,
is
They can't mention
Well,
that to
the main-
outsiders.
the main problem is we killed all the bears in fisticuffs long before that, so we didn't have any left.
All right.
Bravo.
So sadly not.
I thought it was strange that, because these guys seem pretty hardcore on slavery, it's strange that they're so close to Braavos, and Braavos would be allow them to sort of practice that.
Yeah, it seems like Braavos is a lot of talk to me. I mean, there's so much slavery in Essos that it's,
Yeah.
Well, when we get to
I mean, I
Pentos,
guess-
you can see, but they can't really enforce it because Pentos basically practices slavery in all but name.
And it's much harder to convince people not to worship their god than to, change their economic policies.
Mm.
Seems like it's very closely tied to
Yeah, I don't know if
Norvos identity.
I don't know. I mean, obviously, Braavos influenced Pentos in sort of, getting rid of the nominal idea of slavery, but I don't even know if Braavos sort of is it really Braavos' mission to get rid of all slavery in Essos, or is it just supposed to be their own little safe haven where slavery can't touch them?
I think
Well,
when
depends
they have a chance,
Yeah,
when they have a chance, they'll do something to help get rid of slavery, but they don't go around making it their 100% mission.
I guess they have to. Well, I think that's the principle that they're abiding by a lot of the time, but they obviously have to weigh cost and risk and all that. They can't sort of reach too far outside their sphere of influence, otherwise they'll compromise the whole thing. So I think they do it where they can, but yeah.
I guess it also depends on what theory you subscribe to. Do you think that the Faceless Men and Braavos was behind the fall of Valeria, or do you think it's something else? Because if you do that, then you probably would say that yes, that is their first and most important mission.
Well, it might be the Faceless Men's ultimate agenda, but maybe not the people of Braavos in particular.
Maybe, yeah.
They just want to live their lives.
I mean,
have fun.
This book's sort of convinced me that every catastrophe was caused by the evil fish people and Cthulhu and all that.
Also, Norvos is the only landlocked city. I mean, as far as access to the sea. So maybe Braavos'
Qohor is too.
Qohor is.
Yeah.
Oh, right. So maybe.
But yeah, I was
Braavos'
thinking
power
the same
because it's a
thing.
maritime city. It's harder for them to influence
True,
the
yeah.
inner land.
Yeah, harder for Braavos to get all its ships in, because that's Braavos' main power ships.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Yeah.
Volantis is the power of land, but Braavos is the power of the sea. We do get a mention of one of the, I think it's 9 wonders made by man that Lomas Longstrider sort of identified as he made his travels throughout Essos and Westeros, and it's the bells that ring over the city, and they determine when people should pray and sleep and eat and have sex.
I love that. Oh, yeah.
Intrusive.
The routing bell.
They'll at least get sex maybe once in a while.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to mishear it.
Okay.
Oh, we also get Lomas Longstrider mentions there's a huge cave near there that was one of his natural wonders. I just
there's
noticed that there near
describes
Norvos.
this honeycomb of hundreds of thousands of caves beneath the city that's full of ancient cave paintings and gems.
What
And,
do you guys think about when you came across this idea of the fact that there's Lomas Longstride, who is obviously their version of Marco Polo, and these sort of wonders of the world, which is obviously based off of the wonders of that same collection of natural wonders of the world and man-made wonders of the world in our own history. I mean, the reason why I asked is because to me it came off a little cheap. Like this is one of the small little things that I didn't really like that much. I thought it was just way too similar to our own history and didn't really take. I love when George takes things from our world history and makes it into a fantastical thing translated into his world. But this is almost like a direct translation. So I thought it was a bit kind of cheap.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those things that works better when you just glimpse it. Like, an offhand comment by Tyrion, just like that. It just alludes to a much bigger world. But when you actually look at it up close in something like this, it does seem a bit obvious.
I wouldn't compare Lomas Longstrider to Marco Polo, because Marco Polo was mainly like a merchant, and it doesn't seem like Lomas Longstrider was that specifically. So
who would you compare?
One of the guess I don't have one specifically, but Magellan maybe, in a sense, because he was more like a pioneer and he also like described specific parts of the world as well.
I guess the reason why I thought of Marco Polo is because he was Europeans' version of that one dude who went all the way out there to those crazy exotic lands, and he's like their one source that they could rely on, and it just seems like Lomas Longstrider sort of plays that role for Westeros.
Yeah, but he's not the only one. You have the sea snake, and you have the two merchants. They talk about like peripherally as well. So I don't think they just have one. I just think that Lomas Longstrider was one of them. Yeah, he had a scholarly way of looking at things. I didn't see the direct comparison to those two, at least.
The only other thing I had on Norvos was this symbol of the axe, which is eventually sort of became very important to the Yandel adventurers who crossed over to Westeros. And yeah, it seems to be a religious symbol, the cross and the star. And they found engravings of the cross on the shores of the Vale where the Yandels first landed, but eventually got superseded by the star.
Yeah, I'd say there's
the
some
same thing about
intermingling, probably. Working its way in, because this is where the Yandels used to live. So, I don't know, maybe they just left some axes behind, and then Norvos found them.
So the Yandels seem to have worshipped these 7 gods for thousands of years prior to the time they crossed the sea. And it wasn't until they appeared to them that they crossed. But the Bearded Priests are a separate religion, but they seem to have taken on that symbol because it was engraved in the caves in the ancient city where the Yandels once dwelt in Norvos.
I like the super nerdy part here where he has the little side box talking about how Archmaester Periston says this about the axe symbols, and Archmaester Harmoon says this. It's just one of those fun little details that they threw in here. Yeah, they're just badly drawn hammers.
It's probably that. I think is it Barth, the guy that's always wrong, always right rather.
Barth is always right, yeah.
Yeah, so whenever you see him, he usually has like the craziest theories, so I'm glad he's always right.
Was there any actual historical societies in our world that sort of use the axe as a symbol of power or for some type of special representation?
Sure, there is.
I want to say maybe the Varangian Guard of the Byzantine Emperor. I want to say they all at least used all carried axes like ceremonially. I don't know if they really used them. They were the Vikings who worked for the Byzantine Emperor.
Oh yeah, we have.
Well, I guess Vikings sort of used. I mean, the axe was definitely a symbolic weapon for like Viking culture as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. It was the main weapon for most of the normal warriors, because a sword was really precious at the time because metal was scarce in the north. So yeah. Almost all Vikings would bear like a long axe or a skagax instead of a sword. So yeah, of course that would be very connected. And you do see sometimes when you depict Vikings in war games and stuff that either they use the raven or they use the axe, which are both historically connected to the Viking kings.
According, do you own an axe, Patrick?
Oh, sorry?
Do you own an axe?
Yeah, of course.
According to Wikipedia, the Labrys is one of the oldest symbols in the world, and it's an axe. It's a double-headed axe, and it was originally found in Crete in Greece. Very old image.
The just for Mimi on one of the recent podcasts of Ice and Fire kept going on about people screwing dragons. Well, Norvos has people screwing wolves.
Yeah.
Or it is whispered.
Maybe that's how the wargs first started, descended from Norvos.
But also at the time,
yeah.
I always just interpreted that, like, in the Middle Ages, even in our own history, people sort of made assumptions and made claims about, bestiality and results of bestiality and all that stuff. And, this is obviously well before, like the formal, like biology and reproductive systems were well understood. So I think people sort of jumped to a lot of speculations about what may happen when this mates with that or that mates with this. So I don't really put too much stock in it, even when I read through this.
Yeah. The idea of like an animal totem for like various civilizations in the books is very common. Obviously, all the houses of Westeros seems to be very, like historically, it's like spiritually almost very closely tied to like a native animal that they respect or try to embody or whatever. Okay, so Qohor is sometimes called the Dark Sister of Lorath and Norvos, sometimes known as the City of Sorcerers. It's next to a dark primordial forest, the largest forest in Essos, and it's I think it's the easternmost free city, and it's sometimes called the Gate to the East.
They worship the black goat or something, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fargo.
It's also the most metal of the free cities.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep, lots of blood sacrificing. The black goat, Qohor, very dark, secretive entity that they worship, and I think they don't know how to make Valyrian steel, but they're one of the few peoples who knows how to rework it, and supposedly it's done through human sacrifices.
I was thinking, actually, does this mean that the Valyrians needed maybe dragon blood to work into the steel of the Valyrian steel for it to actually become magical like that? And just putting out the thought, because in this world there's a lot of power in blood, and to make a sword almost as good as a Valyrian steel sword, which they are essentially doing. Not just reworking, but making their own kind of swords that are almost as good as it says in one of those small boxes. I would just think that might actually relate to the whole. Maybe you need to use blood of some sort, and the more potent the blood, the better you can use it. The better material you can make out of it. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, it seems to be like the purity of the blood or the nobility of the blood. But the blood magic that we see is usually tied to sort of bringing things back from the dead. So maybe that's the idea with Valyrian steel. It's like giving new life to the Valyrian steel so that it can be reshaped, which makes me think that maybe there's something almost living about the Valyrian steel, because I think some people speculated that you needed like a dragon to make it. That's why no one else can make it, that you needed like a dragon's breath or a dragon's bones or some kind of dragon magic to create the steel. And then maybe you need blood magic to bring it back to life so that it can be reworked or something.
So how did that smith in King's Landing rework ice into two new swords?
He went to flea bottom and found a little.
He found a couple of peasants, yeah.
Yeah, got some candy.
I don't know. Well, you'd need.
Yeah, it adds a bit of an edge to it, like all these cool swords. Someone's obviously had to die for these swords to come into existence.
Yeah.
And not even that, right? Yeah, in the story, there's probably some small, some boy from Flea Bottom or something that just got fetched in the night and made into welding materials.
Although if it has to be sort of noble blood, then I don't know. Did any nobles disappear around that time?
Maybe. We found Tyrek Lannister.
The sword.
Yeah,
sorry.
Tyrek Lannister.
Tyrek Lannister.
Oh, yeah, exactly. They bound it to the Lannisters by using Lannister blood.
Oh my god, that's why Tywin was so bent on finding him in the first chapter of Book 3. They found him, they put him in a dungeon, then they melted the sword, then they tempered it through his heart.
Yeah.
Well, one mystery solved on this podcast.
It's canon.
Not at all a crackpot theory. No.
So yeah, the one connection we get in the books is Vargo Howitt, I think. Who's the nicest guy, so not the best representative of the city, I guess.
But he has a lisp, right? Or is it just the audiobook where he has a lisp?
He has a lisp.
No,
he has a lisp.
Oh god, you need to read his. I just skip over it because I just can't make sense of it.
Okay.
King Slayer.
So do all Qohoric people have lisps?
Seems unlikely.
We
Yeah.
can only hope so.
Maybe it's part of the speech pattern. They just pronounce S's differently than we do.
He had to sacrifice part of his tongue to make like a Valerian steel steak knife.
Steak knife.
Yeah, okay.
Apparently
Maybe not.
they're renowned for their forestry, making great things out of the surrounding woods. And stuffing animals. Apparently there's a stuffed lemur in the citadel which all of the acolytes pat before they have an examination.
Chopping hands and chopping wood.
Nice. Yeah, that's their motto.
Yeah, are lemurs?
One or the other.
Did lemurs
Come in.
exist in the old world or not? I found that kind of interesting. I guess maybe.
Oh God, here comes FTWard and his old world, new world rules.
Well, yeah, but I guess I thought.
I'm pretty sure they ate potatoes in the old world, actually.
I would love it if the Qohor were like famous potato farmers.
Let me look here.
Are they from like Madagascar or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Are you offended that they didn't come from Madagascar in here?
Well, I find it interesting when animals and flora and fauna find their way into the old world, or what I consider the old world in Westeros and Essos.
Yeah, there's a few moments where I was a bit like weirded out. Like a couple of the whales are obviously whales that exist in our world, and I think even crocodile got a mention, which I was surprised that it wasn't called a lizard lion.
Yeah,
crocodiles are mentioned in the main books proper as a separate thing than lizard lions.
Okay, so I guess either lizard lions or alligators, or they're just a completely different mythical animal.
I believe there is something else, but again, it's
A lizard
probably
lion
beyond
doesn't sound
scope.
like a crocodile or an alligator. It sounds like, a lizard lion, a lion that's a lizard.
Well, I'm
You know,
not. I'm not buying into the whole Avatar thing where you mix races thing. No, I think it's just like in old, like in old Europe, you tended to call a lot of things lions if it's just ate meat and resembled a little like a lion. You had like panthers, or not panthers, the like other animals. Yeah, other animals, they call them lions as well, something lions. So I think it's the same. Well, I always thought it was the same principle, that it was some sort of lizard which resembled the lion in its manner of some sort.
Apparently,
And it's just
crocodile is an Old English word, and it means crocodilos, which means worm of the stone.
Yeah, I mean they're
Nile crocodiles. Yeah.
crocodiles in Marine, I think, at her wedding or something.
See, that's another thing we need to get Howland Reed in here to explain to us.
And the biology of lizard lions.
Because he lives in there.
Add it to the list.
Yeah.
But I thought the whole notion of these three kind of cities founded on religion, for the people that say that we didn't get anything new in this book, that it's just rehashing stuff, I thought that was something that was at least unexpected to me.
I think the Essos section is where we get the most new stuff.
Yeah, certainly in Essos.
Oh, absolutely.
Or at least sort of giving context to a lot of these cities that we've only had.
For everyone else, like do the free cities come off as sort of like similar to the provinces in the Roman Empire? I mean, these are things that branched off culturally, and they were sort of part of this interconnected thing with this really ancient, really powerful empire. And then they sort of became their own thing,
Yeah, I'm thinking Italian city-states. I mean, a bit further apart, obviously.
And it's almost misleading to call them just cities, because they obviously have a surrounding sort of region and lots of cities, many of which are actually bigger than places like King's Landing that are sort of tributary subject to them.
Yeah, especially Volantis. I mean, that's an empire.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then again, you could say that if you take and think about the Roman Empire, you could say like Volantis could be something like Byzantine Empire.
Yeah.
Because and maybe King's Landing, because it's sort of like at proxy a a city also from Valerians. You could say that might be London or something like that, because it's in a sense there's a lot of cities around that have been founded by the Romans and grew to be a city in their own right afterwards in our history as well.
Right.
So I think it's
Definitely.
I think you can apply it to that.
Yeah, you can definitely get some of your bearings from real-world history and geography and things like that. Qohor lies near the ruins of Sarnor, a kingdom desolated by Dothraki raiders during the Century of Blood. Is this the first time we hear of the Kingdom of Sarnor?
I think so. If you look at the Land, Ice and Fire map, you can see like Kingdom of Sarnor. So like anyone who looked very closely 2 years ago would have been like, "Ooh, what's this?" But, yeah.
Yeah, I think I remember saying, "Ooh, I wonder what this is," but then I figured out that these are in parentheses because they're all destroyed by the Dothraki, and they've all got Dothraki names now.
So where's that city that Danny finds after wandering through the Red Waste? Is that
Toloros?
Yeah, Vace Toloro. It's like I don't know, halfway between. It's like halfway between Lazar, where she started out, and Karth.
Okay, so it's nowhere near this kingdom of this. Okay.
No, the Red Waste is way to the south.
It's all way south. This is in the north.
According to the wiki, Daenerys travels through southern Sarnor during her journey with Khal Drogo's Khalasar from Pentos to Vace Dothrak. So
the southern Sarnor in modern times is now part of the Dothraki Sea.
Yeah.
But so apparently they do talk about it then.
I swear, the Dothraki just destroy everything. They need like a little subcategory for like ruined cities. So it's like destroyed by the Dothraki.
Well, anything that's got Vyas over it besides Vyas Dothrak.
Yeah, they destroy the city, then they rename it to like smote their enemies.
The Dothraki are like the Iron Islanders, but on land.
Yeah,
they're just like a force of nature. They're just like natural selection. They like just test all the civilizations around them, and if you can't hack it, you're never meant to be there.
One of the critiques that people have given the Dothraki is that they're meant to be a stand-in for the Mongols, but in real life the Mongols were a lot more advanced and they wouldn't just destroy everything. Like that, maybe Orientalism when we're discussing that. That's one of the things that comes up a lot. But I would defend that by saying that the Dothraki are a relatively young civilization. They're only like 300 years old since Valyria died out, so they need to find their footing.
Did we know they were only that since the Century of Blood or whatever? Did we know that?
It mentions that
this book.
Yeah,
I think we did. Like we knew that they had at least showed up after
the
Valyria
started riding out. They united and they just started riding out to destroy.
But that doesn't mean that there may not have been other steppe tribes, similar to them before. It's just this particular tribe. In its way it's set up now is newer, but that doesn't mean that there weren't horse tribes of people who, rode horses and fought with arcs and stuff like that in the past, right?
Oh, I think there definitely was, like thousands of years back, but this is, I guess, obviously the Century of Blood sort of made them into something greater, just galvanized them, and just they saw the rotting meat all around and just stirred them to action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I kind of got through this book, that the reason why they also write out is also sort of religious, because they were against people tilling the land and stuff like that and building on it. And I thought it was against their god's will. So that I think that sometimes when they say some people don't really want to anger the Dothraki by building near them, that would be an affront to the Dothraki god.
Yeah, I think that was a new detail we got, that they have that sort of religious motivation and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure we hadn't heard that before, but since we are supposed to be on, sort of on Qohor, just don't forget that this Qohor was the place with the 3,000 Unsullied, and who beat back Cal Temo and got all the until there were only 300 left. It says 18 charges before he died, and his successor told them to cut their braids and toss them at the feet of the surviving Unsullied. So
yeah, that definitely bolstered their reputation in the eyes of the world. Even the Dothraki bent the knee to them.
Yeah,
they're that disciplined.
Yeah, and it says that happened 400 years ago, so relatively early after the fall of Valyria.
And that was the Century of Blood was kind of almost good for these three cities, because it actually they figured out ways to defend themselves, and they actually formed a sort of loose alliance. The Norvos and Qohor agreed to have each other's backs against the Dothraki, and that there's not the sort of hostility that there are between the southern free cities.
Yeah, even though they... Go ahead.
Go on. Oh, yeah, I'm just thinking. I think we're gonna say the same thing. That even though they're like praising different gods, and the Norvosi don't really condone what they're doing in Qohor. Yeah, I like that little bit. That it was kind of like an uneasy alliance, but they haven't had a reason to not be allied really for last.
It's interesting.
Long while.
It's interesting also that Qohor is so, like, economically they're really tied to Volantis. Like, they talk about how that's like their biggest trade is sending wood down the rivers to Volantis and the other Volantine cities.
Yeah, it's almost like they're benefited by their location. Like, it's not like these are highly fertile lands. I mean, the forest obviously is valuable, but the Qohor are going to be the best people for that forest because they're so skilled at forestry. So it's almost like, why upset the balance? There's no real reason to attack each other. They sort of just eke out a living and live in peace.
Yeah, and pray to weird evil gods.
And pray to weird evil gods, yeah.
I'm sure the black goat of Qohor is probably just misunderstood.
It's grossly misunderstood.
Yeah, he's just a big cuddly guy.
It's just a teddy bear. It demands the occasional baby. Okay, cool. Any more to say on those three cities, or should we move on to Mir, Lys, and Tyrosh?
Let's move on.
Okay, so these are the what are they called? The quarrelsome daughters?
The quarrelsome daughters.
Quarrelsome.
Yep, so they're just three cities endlessly squabbling, often involving the kings and knights of Westeros in their spats. The lands between them are known as the disputed lands, and they're constantly trying to assert their borders on this very sort of amorphous territory. Culturally, they share a lot in common. They're ruled by wealth and a mercantile class rather than birth. So you sort of see this rise in the mercantile influence, also sort of prospered by Illyrio. Yeah. And one thought I had was that it's kind of in Westeros's interest that they're continually fighting with each other, because the few times that they have sort of teamed up, they've been very dangerous in terms of invading the Stepstones or messing in the affairs of the Seven Kingdoms. So I was wondering if that was kind of part of King's Landing's kind of some of their activities. They have to constantly keep those three cities maybe quarreling with each other or something.
Yeah, that was the thing we got in the Rogue Prince, where those three cities combine, and that was why the Sea Snake and Daemon Targaryen wanted to go to war and attack them on the Stepstones, because they had gotten together. You know, and we get that story a little bit again here in the Mir Tyrosh and Lys. Is it Lys or Lys? Do you guys?
I think it's Lys. Lys,
I think.
George says you can pronounce it however you want.
Maybe it is Lys. Oh, I don't know.
Since we don't have
Well,
really
it's kind of like when Australians say good day and Americans say good day.
Sort of.
I mean, what's the right way to say it?
Or laboratory or laboratory.
Laboratory? What's that?
I have
a question for you guys. Like between these three cities, Mir, Lys, and Tyrosh, I mean, these all seem to be, relatively, advanced free cities in Essos. For any of you guys, did any of you guys ponder like out of the three of them, which one you want to live in, if you had to pick?
Tyrosh.
Lys.
I want to
weird. Probably Lys.
For the pleasure god.
No, I'm sorry guys, but Tyrosh with the colored beards, that's awesome. This is the most manly city of them all.
Oh, so much work.
Because you want to color your own beard, or because you want to be around colored beards?
Both, of course.
Yes.
You don't need to live in Tyrosh if you want to color your beard. Just go for it.
No. I just want to live in a society where it's accepted to color your beard.
Here's the thing. The reason why I bring this up is because it sounds like a lot of you guys said Lys, which is the same thing that I thought. The way they describe it, the weather is like perfect. It sounds like a paradise. Everyone there is really good looking. There's the pleasure gardens. All the women there are hot, and it's like, sounds like heaven on earth. But the more I read about Lys in the world of Ice and Fire, the more sort of depressing it got. Like, I mean, yeah, it's awesome and the weather's great, but these are all like slaves.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It made me think of like Eastern Europe, where a lot of the women have to unfortunately turn to prostitution and stuff like that due to the economic situation. And there's something, I mean, just in my opinion, really sort of depressing and sad and really like not the environment that I really want to be around, So that's why I asked. It's just because I went through that transformation of, I always sort of glorified Lys as this really like awesome, paradise type place. But after reading more about it, I don't think I like it as much anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of looks much nicer than places like Slavers Bay. They maybe treat their slaves better, but you still got to remember this is all slavery. None of these people are here voluntarily, so it is, it's very, pretty icky to think about it. So maybe you wouldn't want to live there knowing that a lot of these people don't want to be there. So yeah.
I like the detail that the Tyroshi are probably the most aggressive slavers, and they even like to go beyond the wall to get wildling slaves.
Yes, and we see that in Book 5, don't we?
I couldn't remember that they were Tyroshi, but somebody definitely was.
I think.
But the Braavosi stop them at port and free the slaves and arrest the slavers.
I don't think it would make very much sense if it was the Lysini that wouldn't really go up and capture a lot of wildlings for sex trade.
Yeah, I don't think wildling women have that reputation as being like crazy.
I don't know, man. They all look like Osho.
I mean, they just learned about certain techniques just recently. So
Tox is hot.
Yeah, the Lord's kiss. So what?
But that doesn't really benefit
that's
the
not who you want
having sex with them.
Yeah, that's not who you want to hire for your sex slaves. You want to get somebody who knows a little more. Shallower learning curve.
I like how you're really breaking down the psychology of sex slavery. How you would go about doing it if you were them.
I'm just getting into the Lysini frame of mind since we're on that part, guys.
Yep. So Lys is the vacation city for the Dragon Lords. I think someone describes it as a feast for the senses, a balm for the soul. Tyrosh is harder. It was founded as a military outpost by Valeria to guard traffic in the steppe zones. And the origins of Myr are less clear, I think it says, and possibly dates back to the dawn of days. And no one knows who built it, but it was possibly the Roinar. But eventually they're obviously colonized not by religious settlers, but by traders.
Yeah, like this is typical Valerian. It was founded on the site of a walled Andal town whose inhabitants they butchered or enslaved.
Footnote.
That was the Valerians. Show up with their dragons and
that's how Valerians.
Just kill everybody and enslave who's left over.
Yeah, this is now my land. What we live here. Well, I have a flag. Do you have a flag?
I have a dragon.
Okay. Haven't any of you watched Eddie Izzard? Okay, well, it's
I know
okay,
of him.
fair enough.
We haven't mentioned the art very much, but the painting I'm looking at on this page here, it's like the big spread of like the merchants and council or something. I don't know if you guys have your book open. I don't see a single painted beard.
You mean the guy leaning over the map?
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
got purple hair.
He's got purple hair.
Ridiculous ponytail.
So this is
where what's his name? Dario's from, right? Dario Naharis?
Yep.
And
yeah, he's Tyroshi.
This is the Council of the Triarchy, who were in the Dance of Dragons? Or were they in the other one, the Ninepenny Kings thing?
They were Dance of Dragons.
They're Dance, okay. So there's been a couple of scenarios where they've teamed up against. And also, at one point, even prior to the conquest, Aegon got involved in a dispute between them.
Against Volantis. Was that it?
Mm-hmm.
But my sort of theory, again, was that basically he considered the fact that if there was ever a stability or a peace formed between the three cities, that it could be a threat to his new kingdom. So he sort of bailed halfway through.
How do you guys picture the disputed lands to look like now?
Just like
On
ravaged.
Yeah, it looks
desolate
really
land
and fertile, but yeah, just a wasteland now.
That's the ultimate, irony that they're fighting over worthless land, but they're so used to doing it that they just keep doing it. It's basically just a pride thing now, or almost just a game to like prove their military strength or their wealth.
Yeah,
The Falklands.
Although they're not really, unlike the Westerosi, there's nothing really. It almost seems civilized, like they agree that they can attack these ships and steal from these ships, and they do most of their fighting out in the water. So, I mean, it's obviously disruptive, but it's not like they're sacking villages and burning crops and all that.
Yeah, I didn't really. The way I pictured it really wasn't sort of like this post-apocalyptic, wasteland where everything's destroyed and all the buildings are rubble. The way I pictured it is more kind of like Belgium. And again, I have to defer to our European co-host here because I don't know as much about Europe as you guys do. But Belgium is made up of 3 different nations: Germany, France, and Flemish. So all sort of living in this area. That's sort of how I sort of pictured it. Is like these 3 different ethnicities, all sort of living right, amongst each other, and depending on where you go in the disputed lands, you can feel like you're in a different country, kind of thing.
Didn't they say there was actually salted land
that's
as well?
what I remember as well.
Yeah, they strewed the land with salt.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
But no one can have it.
Is that even a real thing?
Yeah. If I can't have it, you can't.
I mean, the same thing was said about Carthage, that the Romans strew, Carthage with salt. But that was just something that people said during that time because they didn't understand how geology works. But just because you throw a bunch of salt on the ground doesn't mean it's going to ruin the land forever and ever and ever.
It's symbolic.
Not forever, but for a long while, it will.
Yeah.
As soon as it rains, that salt is gonna be out of there, right?
Yeah, they have to go back every.
How long can that salt stay there?
Up the salt.
No, it's not like that. If you ruin the pH of the ground, and nothing can grow there, then there's nothing to make it a better pH afterwards. So essentially, the ground stays at least sour for a long while.
Yeah, but if it rains, water is a neutral pH, right? So it's going to raise the pH to 7 if it's too low, or if it's too high, it's going to bring it down to 7, right? I mean, that's what water does.
Yeah, but
you add water to anything, it's going to neutralize the pH over time.
But in the case of Carthage, it's in an area where there don't really get a lot of rain, so that wouldn't really help that much.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's a historical fact that Carthage wasn't actually salted. It was just a sort of an old wives' tale that was said amongst the Roman Empire as a punishment. But they didn't really put salt on the ground, did they?
I don't know. I've always thought they did, and I haven't heard otherwise, at least. But of course, I can be wrong, even though it's very seldom that I am. But yeah.
So it originated in the 19th century, the rumor that they salted Carthage, but no ancient sources exist that document it. You should check out the Wikipedia article. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, but yeah, I don't know. It's just seems, at least story-wise, narrative-wise, that if George brings this in right now, it serves for a purpose. Why would you salt the ground if it didn't actually do anything in the book, at least?
Well,
because
I guess they didn't.
That was commonly done during medieval times. That was a misconception that was commonly spread during the medieval ages.
Maybe it's magical Essos salt that kills everything.
Yeah. There we go.
Shadow salt.
That's probably it.
It's shadow salt.
From a shy.
Yeah, no one talks about the shadow salt.
It's because they're afraid.
Well, we know one thing grew out of the disputed lands, and it's all these sellsword companies that have been generated from the conflict. And it's almost like, at this point, just a game of chess. Like, they're not even committing their own soldiers or navy to this. It's more just they're buying sellsword companies and then just hitting each other with them. And indeed, it's also in the sellsword's interest that these conflicts keep fermenting, so they probably have a hand in it as well, because it pays their bills. And when there's no conflict, they have to run over to Slaver's Bay or something. I wonder if that's like why Dario keeps trying to generate conflict, because he knows it's going to get his men paid.
Yeah, I mean, I would think all sellswords, you can suspect that type of motivation, but I mean, that's only going to last you to a point, right? If you're constantly causing shit, and there has to be some kind of underlying hatred amongst the cities to fuel that, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess we don't really learn that much about it. It doesn't seem like there's any, conflict that we would associate with like raw emotionality, because it's not like there's kings in these places. It's run by magisters and what's the term? Archons. And there's no religious feuds, obviously, between them. It's basically economics and territory. So there isn't that much emotional investment.
Are brown, or that says that they might be Roinar, and people of Lys are, fair. So I don't know. Maybe there's a race conflict. I doubt so.
Yeah, like we're more Valerian than you.
Yeah,
it's possible. And there was a mention of one sellsword company called the Company of the Rose, which was, I think, self-exiled itself after Torrhen Stark bent his knee to the Targaryens. And essentially they're sworn to the king in the north, which kind of broke my heart, because imagine if Rob knew about them. He could have contacted them and gotten them to fight for him, because there's a few thousand soldiers in their company. Assuming they're still around, of course.
With what money?
It's strange they're not mentioned. Well, I think White Harbor is pretty rich. I imagine Winterfell is not lacking for... I mean, there's probably not as rich as, Highgarden or Castle Rock, but I can't imagine Winterfell's poor.
It's strange that Rob never hired sellswords. I guess maybe it was seen as dishonorable or something.
Yeah, it might be. Strange that those guys don't have
connections. Like, you'd have to send a ship out from White Harbor, take ages to get to, like, I don't know, Lys or Pentos, whereas,
that's true. The only passage is past King's Landing, I guess.
Yeah, Stannis doesn't seem to have any dishonor in hiring sellswords or sell sales, though.
Yeah, but he doesn't
Stannis
do
is not
it
an honorable
until...
person.
What?
Right after
No, you didn't.
Why do you guys think the Northerners will call the Company of the Rose? When I hear Rose, I think
the Blue
of
Rose.
Winter
The Blue Rose.
Yeah, the Blue Rose is a symbol of Winterfell.
Yeah, it seems like there's dozens,
Glass gardens and all.
Maybe even hundreds of sellsword companies.
Mm-hmm.
So we only get to hear about a few, but there's probably heaps all around Essos.
Yeah, it's not clear from this passage here whether we're supposed to think the Company of the Rose is still around or not. Like, it doesn't at all make it clear whether they're still, available or have gone. It also, it also mentions the Stormbreakers, founded in the aftermath of the Dance of the Dragons. Who, Stormbreakers, you assume they'd be from the Stormlands, but
yeah,
I don't know. So. I don't remember what happened to the Stormlands at the end of the Dance of the Dragons, that they would have been exiled.
And there's obviously a lot of Westerosi in these sellsword companies. I think, people have gone over, exiled people have joined up to get paid to make a living. And obviously the Golden Company was founded as a way of returning to Westeros and overthrowing the Targaryens.
Interesting that we don't have the reverse happening, like people getting exiled from Essos and coming over.
That's why, that's why it always seems like Westeros is more central, because people are always trying to get into it. But we get the guy from the Summer Islanders. He goes to Robert's court, and he's always trying to get him to help him take back the Summer Islands. Yeah, Zelvazo.
Yeah, but no army.
Well,
you would think if I was the Stormlands, I would hire an extra army if I was in the middle of a war with the Reach. You would think that could come in handy sometimes. The other way around.
Well, the problem you're going to have there is that, Lys and Myr and Tyrosh and Volantis are all probably nearer to where the sellswords are currently sitting, and they're also probably can pay more.
Yeah, and
really
the lands... The problem is, in Westeros, the lands are really that disputed. It's pretty much set, and has been set the last 300 years, more or less, except for a few squabbles here and there and stuff like that. So it wouldn't really make sense for a sellsword company to rise up in Westeros.
I don't know. During the time when the Riverlands was constantly getting switched between the Stormlands and the Iron Islanders and Reach and their own independence, there was a lot of transition going on there. There wasn't really definitive borders, and I feel like those conflicts could have really been swayed if you throw in the Golden Company version of Essos in there, that they could really help one of those kingdoms out.
Well, there could have been sellswords there, but that was before the conquest, and history gets a bit murky when you go beyond that 300 years.
We do see sellswords obviously coming over. Bronn is obviously hanging around even before the start of the war. So, but as you say, the reverse isn't very apparent. We don't get groups of Westerosi sellswords popping up in Westeros. I guess it's must something to do with its honor, maybe, or maybe it's just a different structure. The way there's lords and the subjects to the lords. Maybe sellswords wouldn't really fit in anywhere. Mercenaries wouldn't really fit in.
Well, what they say is that, Lys and Mir and Tyrosh, they basically don't have standing armies. Whereas in Westeros, everybody has their feudal levy that's supposed to follow them. So, I think that's another reason that, they don't use as many sellswords, because they don't need as many sellswords.
And maybe that's a better way of doing things, because you're not compromising your leaders in battle.
On the other hand, if you hire sellswords, you're not taking everybody away from the harvest.
But you can only trust them as far as you pay them.
That's the thing, yeah, you can't. You need to find people are trustworthy, and there aren't very trustworthy sellswords. They're constantly switching sides whenever the battle goes awry. They can be bought. Yeah. They're only as loyal as their purse, as people keep saying.
They can't be bought. They can only be rented.
Yep. Cool. I think that's everything on Mir, Lys, and Tyrosh. I don't know. There wasn't much on Pentos that we got. We pretty much know everything that was in here. But basically, it's the nearest city to King's Landing. There's daily trade between the two cities. It was founded as a trading outpost by Valeria, and eventually absorbed by, I guess, the region of Andalus, which was where the Andals formerly lay. I guess there's some still around. And it's mostly for trading, seafaring, farming people. It seems to have place less importance on Valerian birth, and there's a lot of intermarrying with the Andals, which makes it, ethnically at least, very closely related to the Southrons of Westeros.
Yeah. There was a little tidbit about how they were slaves, as opposed to, well, even though they weren't, and it was like to live and be fed by your magisters, that costs more than the services you can provide, which I thought was really weird and goofy. But yeah, that explains why they are slaves and everything but the word.
It's sort of a workaround, like indentured servitude.
Exactly.
Presumably they can't be as brutal as, say, people in Slaver's Bay, but that's probably the same case for Myr and Lys and Tyrosh, where they're not, physically getting them to kill each other.
The historical conflict between Braavos and Pentos?
Well, we got a mention of it in Book 5. There was a pact arranged where they had to outlaw slavery in Pentos because of this conflict with Braavos. So yeah, but you get a bit more about it now.
Yeah, we get that there was six wars, and the Braavosi won 4 of them.
Yeah, Pentos is boring, actually.
Yeah, it's
yeah, I mean,
a location.
The most interesting thing is the prince sacrificing, probably.
Oh yeah. Would you be a prince? You'd you get to fuck all the women you want and eat the finest foods and stuff, but anytime you could get your throat slit.
Gotta pray for that.
Well, it depends on the time, really. If you're in a perpetual conflict with Braavos or some of the other free cities, then no, I wouldn't, because it'd be pretty high probability that I'd be killed pretty soon after. But if I could get a clear 10 years of whoring and eating what I wanted, maybe.
10 years of whoring, huh?
Illyrio seems to do that, and he's not prince of anything, though.
I guess the thing I thought of is, we didn't get that much information, but the information that we did get from Pentos, do you think that may reveal some of the motivations behind the grand, the conspiracy that they're, whatever Magister Illyrio is doing with Varys?
Not particularly.
No.
I generally just see the royalty is just going down. They even say the prince is just a figurehead. He's just there to placate the masses. He's there for ceremonies. The real rulers are these magisters and this mercantile class. And I think that's where things are heading. And I think that may be part of the plan with Illyrio and Varys to maybe not get rid of the king, because you kind of need the king to rule, to be seen to rule, but eventually usurping some of that power for, I guess the traders and the merchants and that class of people, that middle class of people.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I guess I kind of think that maybe there's kind of a modern day kind of Band of Nine kind of conspiracy going on, but I don't know that there's a ton of evidence for that.
Well, the final confrontation Varys has with Kevin, he's talking about Aegon as this perfect boy. He's this perfect, educated, lived among the people. And And I think that's the point. It doesn't matter whether he'll be a good king or a good ruler or whatever, or even whether he's intelligent. It's more that he'll be an attractive figurehead to unite the people, make them happy, calm the rebellions. But the real ruling will be done by the small council and the people, the businessmen, basically. And I think that's where people in the free cities want things to head, because they're sick of this constant war that spills out over Westeros every 10 years and just completely consumes all trade, sends refugees flowing over the narrow sea, sends sellswords back and forth. It's horrible. So I think maybe that's part of the greater plan to create stability and a better form of rule.
Boring.
I don't know.
Maybe not. I don't know.
It makes sense to me.
Shall we go on to Volantis, guys?
Yeah.
That's everything. Yeah, we sort of know Pentos. It's basically, doesn't really matter what happens there. It's more just a location for various meetings between the characters. But yeah, Volantis, along with Braavos, the richest and most powerful of the free cities, pretty much the polar opposite in terms of its treatment of slaves, class, military power. Obviously, it favors the land, whereas Braavos favors the sea. And it's at opposite sides of Essos, essentially. One of the earliest cities born out of the Valyrian expansion, made as a military outpost. And it's very rich in the old blood of the Valyrians, although they sort of keep to the inner city behind black walls. And there's a bridge that connects them to the sort of lower quarters where everyone else lives.
Description of the walls and how big they were, to me, it reminded me of the Theodosian walls that protected Constantinople for so long. You know, they had the double walls with with like all that, like all the moat and all that crap in the middle. So it was almost impossible to sack or to raid until gunpowder was invented, and that just made me think of the similarities between the two. And you know, once the Western Roman Empire fell, Constantinople went on as sort of the last remnant of Rome, even though it wasn't Rome, obviously. It's sort of like the Volantis is the same thing with Valyria in a sense.
Yeah, I tend to think of Karth as being similar to the Byzantine Empire a lot, but you're right. Volantis is really a much more one-to-one comparison.
I guess for me, Volantis almost seems like more of a Slaver's Bay kind of eastern city than one of the free cities that we see so much of. That's just kind of my take.
Slave to master ratio 5-to-1.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Well, it's probably because they keep so close to the Valyrian lifestyle, and the Valyrians are very alien to whatever the Westerosi and the Western Essos cities normally think.
Yeah, they seem to be the closest thing to Valyria that we have still in the world, and they see themselves as the heir to Valyria. That was obviously how they presented themselves after the Doom during the Century of Blood. They tried to assert control over the old freeholds. Obviously, they succeeded to an extent, and then they fell back, and then I think the Dothraki pushed them back to their original thing. But they're still pretty big. I mean, they have a lot of cities under their rule. They have a lot of wealth, a lot of trade. I think they were founded as an outpost during the war against the Rhoynar, and even though the Valyrians were the ultimate victors, they gained a lot of wealth from that. They gained control of the Rhoynar and a lot of military might and military reputation. So
I think Volantis was actually founded previous to that, was sort of a cause of the war with the Rhoynar, but yeah, right around that time. And they certainly were the big beneficiaries of the Rhoynar not being there anymore.
Definitely, yeah.
Did anyone else think how weird it is that the TV show's Talisa came from the city? Like, she does not seem like the kind of person to come from the city, right?
No, she's very open-minded for a person from Volantis. Especially she's supposed to be noble.
Triox, yeah.
Yeah, so shouldn't she have like Valyrian hair and eyes and stuff like that?
She learned how to do CPR.
I know, why Volantis? They could have picked any other free city.
Seriously, right? Like, anything.
I would
Braavos.
Any other city. Pentos,
I think he had just read A Dance of Dragons and like, oh yeah, let's do some world building, and name, foreshadow this, but like, yeah.
It's so
This is
random
like the
because
worst of the free cities.
it's like it's not even like the city's even brought up in the show, apart from that instance. Like they could have picked anywhere; it wouldn't have mattered to the viewers. 'Cause it's not like
other than Pentos and Braavos, right?
it's almost like that was one of the catalysts for why they thought she was a spy, because that was so obviously incorrect.
Sure.
They tried to retcon it in a little bit, or I guess not really retcon, but say, she had this experience that made her turn against slavery and all that. But yeah, that was just a bad idea.
Maybe that was her being rebellious, like dyeing her hair brown because she didn't want to be like her parents. I'm gonna run away.
And not at all having purple eyes and everything.
So gap year to Westeros.
She obviously went to nursing school, so
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
at her RN, she passed her NCLEX, and then got a job over in Westeros.
I agree. Volantis does seem to have a lot more in common with Slavers Bay, and obviously it's getting involved in the fight against Dany, because obviously slavery is such a huge part of their identity and economy. So it is interesting how they've almost moved away from the other free cities. Or maybe the other free cities have moved away from them.
Yeah.
Does everyone pretty much think that there's going to be a huge slave revolt, pretty much led by the widow of the waterfront in favor of Dany in the next book?
Definitely. That's yeah.
That would be book 8.
Spoiler alert, man.
Yep. The last thing that the widow of the waterfront says to Tyrion is, "Tell her we are waiting. Tell her to come soon." So I think if Dany triumphs over the Volantis fleet, she'll have lots of friends in Volantis. And it's interesting how when Tyrion gets to Volantis, and there's a really cool passage where he's describing proud Volantis, Queen of the Rhoyne, Mistress of the Summer Sea, home to lovely lords and ladies, but never mind the packs of children that roam the alleys, screaming in shrill voices, or the slaves with bent backs and tattooed faces scurrying everywhere like cockroaches. Mighty Volantis. And basically, all the reputation of this grand city, but actually looking upon it, it's basically covered in vines and cracking and decaying in these empty fountains. So I think, and at the end it describes the smell that hung hot and humid and rich and rank and pervasive, and all the flowers are dying. So I think definitely Volantis is heading for a fall.
Yeah, it does seem like a city in decline, as opposed to Braavos, which is a city on the up.
It's almost like this huge mass of people without a leader, because the leaders are tucked away in their little castle, and the people around them that are cut off by this sort of symbolic bridge outnumber them by like 100, and they're all sort of running around like headless chicken and suffering, and these hordes of orphans running around. So it's almost like this city that's ready for a collapse, but it needs a leader, I guess. It needs someone to take over, maybe.
How do you guys think this giant Lord of Light Temple in Volantis is going to play a role in the future? Because, I mean, it looks like George really went out of his way to emphasize how Lord of Light and R'hllor is a big deal in Volantis, and that's where the biggest temple is. And, obviously this religion has played a big role in the story so far. It'd be interesting to see how they cope with, victorious Dany trying to take control of the city kind of thing.
Yeah, I wonder if they would be okay with Dany, because they obviously, champion fire so much. What's more fire than a dragon?
Yeah.
No, it seems like
Dany is the savior.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what Venera was saying.
Yeah, and it seems as well that the Tigers are supporting the faith in the knowledge that Daenerys might be the savior and stuff like that. So I think if Volantis would to have a change, I think it would be supported by the Tigers, as long as they can get their war and their glory out of that.
But so the elephants are in charge now, are they?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, but they usually want peace, but they are going to war against Dany, I guess, because she's threatening their economy.
And the Tigers are about to gain a majority. Because
yeah.
I kind of think that narrative-wise, that Dany has learned her lesson with mingling and meddling in Essos business. So I think she would, if the Tigers threw down the elephants and that said, "Well, we will support you all the way," and then she would say, "Well, if you support me, then you won't have slaves, of course."
Maybe that'll be like the moral dilemma that Dany faces is, the Tigers running Volantis will, say, okay, we want to support you. So does she take that support, or does she, try to free the slaves again?
I don't think there'll be any. If she does triumph against Volantis, I think she'll just take them all out, all the tigers and all the elephants, because they're part of the old guard. They know slavery is all they know, so I think she'll try and create a new system of government. But it's strange that I don't even think it matters what Dany intends to do or plans to do. It's almost like she's started something that's almost acting on its own now, this slave revolt. It's almost just like a ripple effect, and all these people are rushing around to anticipate her in Pentos, Illyrio, and Varys.
It's like
going to be like the French Revolution, like somewhat similar, like just
I can see her maybe defeating the Volantine fleet, and then there being an uprising in Volantis. She gets there, and the Widow of the Waterfront is sitting on the throne or something.
I gotta say, I love the elephant drawing and quartering painting we got here in the last Volantis page.
That's one way to go.
Oh yeah.
I just pictured the whole scene in my head, and I was like, I never done that before. I never thought about how you get pulled apart from horses or elephants, but it probably looked pretty cool.
It's interesting though, because that was the punishment for him trying, even though he was loved as a ruler, he tried to insist that he would be the ultimate ruler now and never have to have another election. And even though they loved him, they said, no, we're a democracy. We don't accept that, which is kind of interesting because, I guess they're regressive in a lot of ways and horrible in a lot of ways, but they still respect democracy.
We're a quote democracy and
it was like their version of the Boston Tea Party.
Actually, like the election festival.
The Boston
which only take 10 days. Unlike the ridiculous American elections, small tangent. Which
Whoa. Shots fired.
Let's not make enemies where there were none.
Americans and democracy, or what? Are we going to do that?
This America? Even the Volantis are more ahead than you.
No.
Are the elections in New Zealand supposed to be so much better than ours?
See what
I hear they just elect people through rugby.
Well, what do you suggest?
I'm just thinking about all the football players and football coaches who have been in Congress here.
I don't think we have to get into that. I think it's a hot topic.
Sounds like a lot of American racism going on right now.
No, I'm not. I don't hate your race.
We're against us. I'm not.
I don't hate the American race. I just don't agree with your democracy.
I think you guys just hate us for.
All right. I think that's most of Volantis before we make war with each other. I think that's everything. Oh, the slaves, I guess. We learn a bit about the different tattoos that mark each slave.
So, what's he called? The I know. What's he called? Patchface. He's from here, right?
Yeah.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's got
which is kind of
nice.
The jester marks, the jester tattoo face.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was because the Baratheon guy, he was supposed to find a bride for one of the Targaryens in Volantis because they have very pure Valyrian blood there.
That is weird.
That gone to Lys or something, though.
Well, that was Eris who commanded it, and he was a bit insane at the moment. I think that was just after.
I think he was still sane back then.
And they actually found one, but she died, right? She drowned with everyone else.
No, I don't think they did find one. I think all they found was Patchface.
Here you go.
That's the way I remember it.
Well, maybe he was
I don't
the one.
know. Yeah, he was. He's actually not meant to be like a jester or anything. He was meant to be Rhaegar because he knew that Rhaegar's is tough.
Stefan Baratheon was very, very dumb.
I don't think so.
Was Stefan Stannis' dad?
He was.
Yes.
Yeah, he was definitely dumb.
Oh, stop it with the status. Seriously, I'm gonna say something about your democracy soon.
Stannis is gonna cut all your heads off.
Should we move on to Braavos?
Yeah.
Braavos.
Final free city. The famed 100 Isles of a fog-shrouded lagoon at the northwest corner of Essos, where the narrow sea meets the shivering sea. And Braavos was originally founded by escaped slaves who just wanted to be free. They rebelled during transport from Sotheros, I think. And essentially, they were slaves from all over the world. And yeah, they made their way up as far as they could from Valeria, and they settled in this closed-off little lagoon.
It kind of reminded me of the Dutch Rebellion. If anybody knows about that.
No, please educate us.
Well, it's just that the Dutch or Netherlands was once a sort of a colony for Portugal, as far as I remember. And well, at one point they just made a rebellion and took all the Portuguese ships and moored in Holland. And therefrom they became like a giant naval power.
But did they build a giant stone statue?
No, but they have canals and stuff like that, so they a little like it. I'm thinking a mix between Venice and New Amsterdam.
Yeah, I think Racely Iron Throne, he cites one of those cities up in like Holland as another influence for Braavos, along with Venice.
Okay, cool. And they had people from as far away as the plains of Jogos Nye, which is where they got the moon singers that prophesized where to find shelter. Which I thought was a bit similar to what happens in north of the wall with the wildlings. You get this prophet telling them that they'll find salvation at Hardhome, and they go there and they end up being transported to Braavos. As slaves, obviously, but they get freed by the Sea Lord when they arrive.
Well, 2 ships get transported. The rest are just eating themselves.
The rest
now.
are just consuming each other and being hunted by White Walkers. Yeah.
So what do you think?
But they were probably all going to end up that way.
You can't win everyone.
What do you think Braavos does with all these liberated slaves? Do you think they have some kind of a work program that reintegrates them into society, or what do they do with all these slaves? Like
maybe, yeah, workplace.
Yeah, what's their? Yeah, I wonder what their integration policy are. Do they give like green cards out, or do they have that meritocracy or something like that?
Like each one gets a coin.
Yeah, and you can keep it for so and so long or something like that. I don't know.
It seems like a pretty hardline meritocracy. They don't privilege any ethnicity above one another. They don't privilege any religion. The first rule of Braavos: no Braavos shall be the slave or a master. So it's
the
pretty equal.
prostitutes are really empowered. So I thought that was a good sign of their.
They are, yeah. They have, yeah.
It's not even really fair to call them prostitutes. I mean, they're like a whole other step up from that.
Well, they run
kind of like a geisha, right?
They're self-employed. They're not like, at the hands of some master. It's all up to them what they want to do, who they want to take.
Yeah, it's like the companions on Firefly.
And they're practically royalty in Braavos.
Or like the high-class hookers in the United States. Not that I would know.
Those
just like them.
They're like those hot chicks that you stalk on Twitter, and they're always putting up really hot photos of themselves. And they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm just going out shopping. Check out my hot dress."
Like the one that Elliot Spitzer had a relation. Cosgrove 9.
Yeah, that's definitely where Martin got his inspiration.
or the Kardashians. Right?
Kind of, actually, yeah. They're kind of like reality
The
stars.
Kardashians.
Yeah, it's not actually crazy. Like the idea that people like these Braavos are fighting duels on behalf of the courtesans and that, like it's very much like a celebrity type of thing.
Speaking as an American, I feel like Braavos reminded me a little bit of San Francisco, and I don't know if my fellow patriots can verify that or not. But like San Francisco, like they legalized prostitution, so it's become like this haven for like prostitutes across the country, and it's like it's on the bay, and like basically Lorath is like Oakland. Because it's ghetto, and it's right next to it.
Sure, why not? I've only been to San Francisco once, very briefly, so I cannot confirm or deny.
Well, they have really good festivals every once a year. San Francisco and Braavos. Like San Francisco has these gay prides, and then Braavos has unmasking ceremony.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but do you think that the unmasking ceremony is fabulous in particular?
It sounds pretty fabulous to me. Like you just got these masks, and you have to make them as gay as possible, and yeah.
And it's based on when they first announced themselves to the world, 111 years after they.
Oh, they came out.
They came out.
Okay. Yeah.
They came out of the lagoon.
They announced themselves. Did they just make a posting on like Craigslist, or like I don't understand how they announced? Like how do you do that?
I guess they just sent ravens everywhere. Oh no, they can't do ravens.
Sent ships.
Ships. It had to be ships.
Ships to Valyria to say, "Oh yeah, sorry, we stole your ship."
You know that city-looking place behind that giant statue of the Titan? Yeah, that's what we are.
Remember when we told you there was nothing behind there? We lied.
Yeah, I hope you're gonna accept this, but yeah, I'm a city.
Lorath is like, wow, I can't believe we didn't know that the whole time.
Lorath is like the girlfriend who probably should have suspected.
Well, no, I think they do trade with Lorath and a few of the others.
Yeah, no, they do.
Landing before they announce themselves. But the thing is, they never accepted trade. They would only go to various places and they never reveal their origins, or they would say they were from Lys or Mer.
They were.
So no one could trace them back to Braavos.
It was pretty sophisticated. Like, they had maps and stuff to point back to, like, the fake cities that they were from, and I'm assuming they would get everyone of one race to go in one trading ship, so you can be like, oh, we're from the Summer Isles, or something like that.
Yeah.
Very clever.
And so the celebration is they all wear masks, and they have 10 days of revelry, and then wherever they are on the 10th day, they reveal themselves.
I wonder if they keep the mask on for their loved ones as well. So they don't actually know who they're having sex with, actually.
Probably.
And
the chief for those 10 days.
Yeah, it doesn't count.
I guess it ties into the Faceless Man as well.
Yeah,
sure.
Sort of.
I've always wondered how much sort of common cause all the different institutions of Braavos have, like the bank and the Sea Lord and the Faceless Man, whether they're all doing their own thing or whether they're all sort of working together.
I think that the Braavosi, they probably have a lot of cultural identity. We are Braavos, sort of like the Dornish. But
yeah, definitely.
I'm just going to guess that the Faceless Men are sort of doing their own thing. Like, they're not collaborating unless the Iron Bank of Braavos pays them or something. I think they're on their own a bit.
Well, they're very secretive, which, I mean, every aspect of Braavos was secret up until a point, so they didn't really carry that tradition on.
Is the Sea Lord of Braavos, is his royal, or whatever his official treasury, is that separate from the Iron Bank of Braavos?
Yeah, I got to imagine.
Presumably.
Yeah.
So theoretically, the Sea Lord of Braavos could borrow money from the Iron Bank of Braavos, so they're two completely different institutions, right?
Yeah, I think the Iron Bank is it's just this separate merchant place.
But I think you should think that Braavos is made up of guilds that all are kind of patriotic to this city, but more than that, they only might maybe just collaborate from time to time.
Dawn's a good comparison, though. They really have a sense of togetherness and cooperation and nationhood or whatever. Like, they're all in it together.
Is that how it's like in New Zealand?
I'm not from New Zealand. Is anyone here from New Zealand?
Where are you from, bro? I thought you were New Zealand. Oh, I'm sorry. Isn't that part of New Zealand?
You're a separate country.
Yeah, it's our colony.
Whatever. Dude, man, what are you doing, man?
So you guys live next to each other? You and Duncan and Jessica? You guys all just hang out every day?
Just 3 houses in a row.
Cool. That's about how I picture Australia. I'd like to go to the Osmoot that you guys have, but I think it's a little too far.
We weren't able to do it. Bina had to cancel at the last minute.
Is she still in Australia at all?
No, I don't think she ever came. I think she had something come up at work, so she couldn't make that. But she'll probably come in soon, so we can do it early next year, maybe.
One more thing about Braavos that I want to mention is the fact that the arsenal has mass production because they build all of the ship parts so that they can all fit together. And that makes me think of the Braavos are really technologically advanced, and maybe they're a generation or two away from the Industrial Revolution. Possibly. They could lead the way. And I've always tried to figure out what time period this, Planetos is in, because they could really be anywhere from the 11th century to the 19th century in, different areas. So yeah.
Well, it seems to be sort of War of the Roses. So is that 1400s, 1300s? So sort of later Middle Ages. But yeah, Braavos definitely seems to be approaching the Renaissance or something with a lot of their technology and styles of government.
Yeah. Fits with being Venice.
So it's definitely up there in places you'd want to live, I guess, if you had to live anywhere in this world.
Oh, yeah.
Although it's definitely dangerous, but yeah.
Don't carry a sword.
If you know how to use a sword, I guess you'll be okay.
I think you would rather be a Craven in Braavos. Or look at Craven instead, because people wouldn't normally challenge you if you don't really look like a fight, would they?
In this encyclopedia, they talk about the fighting style of Braavos, the Braavosi style, and how it's sort of like fencing. And it makes sense because, this is a city that is surrounded by water, so there's really not going to be a whole lot of benefit to armor because you could fall into the water and drown if you had armor on, right? So I guess in that sense, it made me think about the island people, either the islanders or the summer islanders, and why they didn't develop a similar type of combat style, because it sort of makes sense if you're a water-bound type of culture, you're probably going to focus more on sword wielding and not really the armor and stuff,
Well, the Iron Islanders don't really have any heavy armor on either, and the axe is very good for sea combat as well, because you can use it. It can double up as like a scaling tool as well, and keep on to whatever things you're gonna hit and stuff like that. So an axe is a good tool as well. So I don't think that the Iron Islanders really need to develop a specific seafaring combat method, because the axe and the round shield is pretty damn effective as it is.
So who do you think would win, an Iron Islander or a Braavosi in a fight?
If you can have a shield, I would say an Iron Islander, because the Braavosi needs to make sure that he can go through the armor. It's more effective against a person that doesn't have like tons of armor or a deflective method. So personally, I would go for the Vikings, of course. But yeah.
Right, but Syria Farrell obviously knew how to do all that tumbling, and he would just stab him in the eyeballs and stuff like that. So wouldn't they just do that?
Do the Iron Islanders do much fighting on ships? Don't they usually land and raid villages and then fall back into the sea? Do they actually do one-on-one? I guess they did with
they are
ship-to-ship
combat. Yeah.
Yeah,
what makes them really good.
Because I guess they'd be far more protected, but as you say, that heavy armor could be a real encumbrance if they fell overboard or whatever.
Yeah, that's why Victorian's like the only one that wears heavy armor, I think.
I think it says they're fearless, and so they don't wear or they do wear a bit of armor, which makes them stupid, just like the finger dancing game they play.
Yeah, I don't know who'd win. I guess I got to assume the Braavos, just because they've got their shit together way more than most places in Westeros. But I guess the Braavos the Braavos wouldn't even want to find themselves in that scenario. I guess there's no point. There's no gain. Yeah. There's no gain to fighting the Iron Islanders. Like, what are you going to get out of it?
Did we know what the finger dance was before this book? I always assumed it was like in Aliens, where you did that knife thing, put your hand on a table and did that knife thing. But here it seems like it's actually catching an axe
I think that's
in midair.
Yeah, I thought it's sort of like that you kind of balanced an axe or did something acrobatic with an axe.
Yeah, we definitely got the explanation for the first time in this one, I think.
Yeah.
The Iron Island section.
Yeah.
One thing about Braavos I wanted to bring up that I thought was interesting was, if you look at the little map there, you can see they mention it too, the Sweetwater River, which brings all the fresh water into the city. To me, that seems like it makes it childishly easy to attack Braavos from the land, and there's no mention of anyone ever having done that. Like, even, during the Century of Blood or anything. So, I wonder, has anyone ever really tried to attack Braavos with an army from the landward side? It seems like you cut off
over the aqueduct, or are they just poisoning the aqueduct? Is that what you mean?
Just knock it down and stop, and then Braavos doesn't have any more fresh water.
Well, there really aren't any powerful cities near them except for Pentos, right? I mean,
the only people really all that powerful? Who they've fought with are Pentos and I guess the Dothraki. But it says, not since the Century of Blood has anyone been bold enough to attack Braavos and provoke the Titan's wrath. So I guess they have a reputation as being impregnable as a fortress, but also, flowing out and really making any enemies pay.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of sounds like it was a...
But there's so many ships passing through that it must be hard to destroy those aqueducts. Like, there must be some kind of guard unit or mainland protection, and there's just so much traffic there that I think it'd be difficult.
Yeah, I think you have to get into the lagoon to then be able to land where the aqueduct is coming from to get up there. So, because it looks like it comes from a mountain, just looking at the map.
Yeah.
We get another wonder, the Titan. I guess we already knew that was one of the man-made. Yandel describes it as an engineering wonder, imposing, strikes fear into the enemies, but also works really well as a protective thing. It's got more murder holes and places for soldiers to rain down arrows. It's basically impossible to pass through the gateway unless the Braavosis want you to.
There's a statue in history that this was based off of, right? Like the Colossus or something?
The Colossus of Rhodes, yeah.
But that was nowhere near as big as the the Titan is, if it really exists.
Nothing is as big as
Nothing is.
Including, like, the man.
No. Yeah, exactly. The walls around Volantis, you can have four horse carriages riding next to each other.
Yeah.
On the wall. That's crazy if you think about it.
It just makes like some of the castles in Westeros seem really small and insignificant. Like
really
Really?
because we see, originally when we think about the wonders, we thought, Harrenhal must be a wonder, Old Town. But it describes some of the places in Yeti, like the palace is bigger than King's Landing. It's crazy.
I thought that was a bit of
you can fit like a King's
exaggeration,
Landing in an Old Town.
Ashai, you can fit about 4 cities. I mean, it must be exaggerating. That's crazy.
With that one, I attribute it to the fish people, but we can get more on that some other time.
Fish people did everything. They're
People
the
did
source of every mystery and atrocity. Braavos is also described as maze-like. I was wondering if maybe the maze makers... I guess it's way too young for the maze makers to have any influence. Unless maybe
Maze-like not the same thing as being a maze, right?
Unless there was maybe some ruins in there, but yeah, probably.
Well, Venice is a maze-like. If you try going through there, can be a bit of a mess.
So it's basically
it's just
hundreds of islands that have been bridged with buildings and things. So yeah. And some of the parts of the city are also sinking under the weight of the buildings. There's one place called the Drowned Town that's completely submerged in water.
Yeah. Well, I kind of thought about the maze thing that it might just be like, old ruins, because most of very old towns, they're all very poorly planned. So if you cut like when people found the ancient ruins of Troy, the whole thing kind of looks like a maze in a way. So I think I kind of had the thought that it might not be a real maze, but just the mazes in Lorath might just be like really, really old ruins of a city as well. That kind of looks maze-like. I don't know.
And they also have, as someone mentioned, a hospital, the House of the Red Hands, the aqueducts, obviously, and the Palace of Justice, which I guess is some sort of law courts. Just kind of, they're pretty advanced. I don't know, is there any other law courts in any other part of the world? Usually decided by some lord or king.
Not in Westeros.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing specific. Just, the King's Court and all that. I actually have my Braavos map from the Lands of Ice and Fire on the wall right now, so I got up and started peeking around at that, and there's a bunch of like neighborhood names and stuff that we don't get in the World of Ice and Fire book, like Silty Town.
Yeah, the shit part of Braavos.
I don't know if that's supposed to be, because the Drowned Town is the really crappy part.
Well, I don't think anyone
people
can
are still
live
living
in
in there.
Town. That's like
No, they do. They live in like the top floors.
Yeah.
And the fish people live there as well, underneath.
Worst neighbors.
If we were to look at the free cities sort of as a one conglomerate unit, let's just say hypothetically the 9 free cities that we've just discussed all united and declared war against Westeros. How do you think that would play out? Do you think who would have the advantage as far as power is concerned?
Westeros is fucked. Like,
yeah,
I think
really.
Westeros would.
I think even 2 free cities would make a dent.
I think Westeros would
so?
do pretty well once they tried to land an army, because it's the free cities. They're going to send a bunch of sellswords, and sellswords are not that great.
Well, Braavos has their own army, right?
They don't talk about them having an army that much as opposed to them having a navy. I mean, they're obviously going to kick ass on the sea. There's no question about that. But once they actually land in Westeros,
Braavos would dominate they'd dominate the entire sea. They would cut off every port. They could unload this enormous, the largest army in the world, the Volantines, start unloading them in various ports. They'd sweep across the land, so all the other cities would just be outnumbered. Even just Braavos and Volantis, who would obviously never ally with themselves, but they would just dominate.
Oh yeah, I forgot
I think
Volantines have a real army.
I think amphibious invasions are not kind of common medieval things, though.
It's a complete fantasy scenario. Obviously, this would never work.
And who says it has to be Essos invading Westeros? It could be the other way around, So I'm just saying hypothetically,
I'm surprised they're not.
That's what I think is going to happen.
And stuff like that.
Like without breaking down the mechanics or the logistics of who needs to land where or whatever. I'm just saying if you just look at them as Westeros as one conglomerate power, and the 9 free cities as their own united conglomerate power militarily, who do you guys think should be more powerful between the two? You guys, it sounds like you guys are all saying the nine free cities, right?
Well, just in terms of numbers, it has to be Essos, doesn't it?
Yeah.
They outnumber them like I don't know what the numbers are, but it seems like they dwarf.
The population of the 9 free cities outnumbers all of Westeros? Are you sure?
I think so. I think Westeros is pretty sparsely populated. I think there's one.
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, we're told in this book that, you know, some of the smaller cities that are ruled by Volantis, like, let me get back over here, like the Volantis and Dalasar and Thelhoris are like the size are like big. I think they say specifically they're bigger than White Harbor or Old Town.
Yeah.
I mean, it's misleading when you look at a map because it seems Essos just seems this huge area with only a couple of dots, but obviously a lot of it hasn't been charted, and as we learned in this, a lot of it is urbanized.
Yeah, and you have to think there's only like 3-4 major cities in Westeros, while 9 large free cities and a few smaller cities, which are all probably the size of the
dozens of other cities. Yeah,
dozens of other cities that are all the same size as the biggest cities in Westeros. So I
Westeros,
think
you got White Harbor, you got Gulltown, King's Landing, obviously the real big one, and
Westeros really is.
And
I mean, I never looked at Westeros as a collection of cities. It's really a collection of kingdoms within each kingdom. I mean, if the North can muster 50,000 people and the Reach can muster 100,000 people army, I mean, that's still a lot. That's a big ass army.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That could actually be a topic for guys' night out, I think.
Yeah.
I guess it depends. There's so many. I guess it depends who's attacking who. Like, yeah, it's hard to say, but I'd probably put my money with Essos.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, final remark for me is, I think that if Westeros put forth a combined army and they've met on the field, I think maybe Westeros could win a combat between the two, because they have like a more standardized sort of army and well equipped.
And they have cavalry, yeah.
And cavalry and siege equipment, and they have the whole 9 yards really.
But no war is one flat field with two armies charging at each other.
Yeah,
right.
It's all these little skirmishes. Yeah.
So anyway, I guess
okay.
if that was the situation, I would say the Westeros would win, but that's never the situation, and the Essos people wouldn't go into a battle like that at any point, because they know that the Knights of Westeros are pretty formidable.
Although, to be fair, I guess if they were able to throw back the quarrelsome daughters, you know, they met them in the field of battle and they were able to push them back at various points. The 9 Penny Kings, I guess, was the more recent one. They're probably 3 of the most powerful. Like, the other 3 at the top are only, Norvos, Lorath, and Qohor. They're not going to do that much damage, are they?
Right.
But, yeah.
No, but you're still forgetting Volantis.
Yeah, Volantis and Braavos are obviously the main ones, yeah. They're the big attackers.
I might put my money on Volantis there, just because if Volantis, I mean, you know, you sort of assume that Volantis has a big, fairly disciplined army. You know, if they've got a big, just, you know, disciplined infantry army, that can beat cavalry and that can beat knights.
And they have elephants.
Yeah.
Horses don't know what to do with elephants.
Yeah, elephant sucks.
I think that's most of what I had to say on Braavos. Faceless Man traced their lineage back to Valeria. There's some possible speculation that they had a hand in the Doom, maybe.
Yeah, I like that idea.
I love that theory. I want it to be true.
Well, the popular theory is that it was basically just a volcanic eruption, that molten lava just consumed the city. So I don't know how the Faceless Man would manage that, but I kind of... Yeah.
Well, the theory is one of the theories is that the Valerians needed sorcerers to keep the 14 flames from erupting, because they were kind of boring into the whole volcano and stuff. So they needed sorcerers to do that, and that's actually said that they used sorcerers to keep the mountains in check. And the theory is then when the Braavosi revealed themselves, they left behind some faceless men to infiltrate the ranks and kill off these sorcerers to the point where the 14 flames couldn't be held back anymore.
Where is it said that they needed sorcerers to hold back the flames?
It's somewhere. It's somewhere in here. Like Yandel talks about it.
Okay, because there is some sections on the Doom of Valeria and Yandel and Rhoynar We're not really going to be covering that. I think we're going to leave that to the Ancient History podcast, which I think Vic is.
Yeah.
But we'll probably leave
Definitely,
those. But but they definitely
But the idea,
good for context.
but that's just the idea.
Definitely.
But,
I mean, the artwork that we get of Valeria is kind of ridiculous. There's like
Dude,
canals
so
of
high
lava
fantasy.
running through the
I
streets.
love looking at that picture.
it's a fantasy dragon Kremlin.
Well, that's
Yeah.
one thing.
You say-
I feel like everything outside of Westeros is pretty high fantasy, really.
Yeah, definitely.
Once we get to actually see it.
Essos is, I mean, reading through it, it's a lot more magical than we think about when we read Song of Ice and Fire.
It really makes you think about, though, like people say in Western Europe, like what they thought about, like this mysterious kingdom called China or this mysterious country called India. It's like they must have thought a lot of crazy shit happened there too that just wasn't true. Right?
Yeah, I got to imagine it's so intertwined
totally.
with mythology. Like Yandel is not getting the facts; he's getting crazy stories from sailors and things. I mean, even historical texts from China describe, the way to Middle East being covered by demons and things. So it's like there's a lot of this probably isn't true, but it's cool to think that it might be. But yeah, I've got a query.
I'm sure in like the geography books in ET, there's this chapter about Lannisport and says the whole city's made of gold and like
Yeah. Okay. Oh, FTWard, you put a video on the thread which talked about. Yeah. Do you want to explain that?
Sure. I just thought it was an interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with that guy, Preston Jacobs, I think his name is, but I think it was an interesting kind of refutation of Dany having been in Braavos ever. I mean, he's pretty crazy with his theories, but
Yeah.
so he goes a little overboard in my opinion, but I think he makes a pretty compelling case.
Yeah,
that,
I agree. Yeah.
Dany was not, the House of the Red is not in Braavos as she believed it to be.
So she remembers this. She remembers this house with a red door as growing up there, and she's been told by her brother that she grew up in Braavos. But the things that she remembered seem to clash with what we understand about Braavos, notably the weather, which is always rainy and drizzly and foggy, and she describes these sort of lush green sunny valleys. These, obviously Braavos is very rocky and filled with canals and water and rushing water, and she doesn't remember any of that. And most notably the lemon tree that grows outside her house, and there's a few references to lemon tree throughout the text, and people saying, there's no lemon. I think it's one's in book 3 where someone in the Riverlands is asking, "Oh, you got any lemon trees at the back?" And the lady just scoffs at it and says, "Lemon trees can't grow in this climate, you idiot. Go down to Dawn if you want lemons." And then another chapter, I think 2 guards are talking and they say, "There's no lemons around here. You got to go to Mur if you want lemons." So citrus doesn't traditionally grow in Braavos, which is another strike against it.
I do wonder if it's not just a rich person's garden that can afford the fertilizers to just keep it alive.
It's possible, yeah.
What's the end point of Dany not being in Braavos? So, like the essay? Like, what does it...
It doesn't really speculate on where she might be.
Yeah, he does like multi-part things, so he's eventually going to get to his point, and I would guess his point is going to be pretty outlandish, just because that's generally. I mean, he does amazing research, but he gets pretty crazy with his stuff.
Oh, that's good.
So it's going to eventually end up with some weird stuff, but I think there is a potential endpoint. As I say, if the free cities and if there is like a modern day 9 penny kings or band of 9, I think there could be a payoff that way.
And I think he references the prophecy that Dany gets a few times: to go forward, you must go back. And she keeps dreaming about this door, but it'd be interesting to think that she doesn't come from where she thinks she comes from. But it could just as easily be another free city. And she was told it was Braavos, maybe to protect where she was. I don't know, maybe disinformation.
To be honest, that kind of sounds like something that would just be a mistake on George's part. Like
possibly, yeah.
That he put that in and then didn't, and then sort of later decided that Braavos was all misty and stuff.
But I think if you look at the timeline of the references to lemons, I don't know. It seems like something, if he didn't want it to be that way, he could have dealt with that. That's just my opinion, I guess.
Is the guy who came up with this the same guy who came up with the Grand Northern Conspiracy?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay.
Okay, any more to say on Braavos?
We all want to live there if we have to live in a free city, right?
No.
Yes, either this
Misty.
place, Misty. Yeah,
Oh,
I guess.
I thought you were the sex slaver that wanted to still live in Lys, Dan.
That was completely hypothetical. We established that.
Well, listen, bro.
You don't want to live there, Thomas?
No, I think they're kind of hypocrites and stuff myself, but I don't like the whole Braavos thing of like, if you're out after dark, it's appropriate that people can just start battles to the death with you. I think that's kind of a fucked up society, and they can pretend they're enlightened and stuff, but I'm not.
Well,
buying it.
out of the 9 free cities, can we just go around and say which one you prefer to live in and why? Starting with FTWard.
I said Lys or Lys originally. I don't know. I think Mir is kind of interesting. They seem to have they're technologically advanced, and they seem to have kind of craft and industry, which I find kind of interesting.
You're just a
Yeah, the
okay.
Irish lens.
Yeah.
What about you, Duncan?
Probably Braavos. Obviously there's drawbacks. I wouldn't walk around after night, but I don't know. It seems like a more egalitarian society. You have opportunities to do various trades. You're not really discriminated against because of who you are. So yeah, and I don't mind cooler climates, and it's pretty close to Westeros, so you can go and have fun in Westeros and then return.
Excuse me, what were we talking about? I just fell out. So.
Which of the free cities would you like to live in if you had a choice?
Oh, that's a good question.
Go ahead.
I don't know. Norvos seems pretty awesome, and with their war bears.
It's compelling.
There.
I like the looks of that. But
You're just saying that because you own an axe.
Nah, because it's a different kind of axe. It's not like a skeg axe, which I'm
All right.
I subscribe to, so I wouldn't know how to use that one specifically. But no, it just looks cool. It looks like Siberian monks with war bears, and that's kind of cool.
Okay, but Mike.
No, but
I can't go to Lys now. I feel guilty. But I want to be somewhere warm. So I think Tyrosh now sounds nice with all them colors. It'd be like the color run every day.
What's that?
Oh my god, it's the best thing ever. You run a marathon or 5Ks, and you get color sachets, and you peg them at everyone. And so you start off running in white, and then you end up finishing the race as like a rainbow. And yeah, you should look it up. It's lots of fun.
isn't it only women that does that?
No, our guys can do it as well.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm sure.
I've only seen women.
Man,
do
whatever
it.
you guys do down on that continent, man.
Dude, this is like
You guys are
everywhere.
happy. Not gonna judge.
Big trending thing.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
All right, man. Whatever you say. I think if I had to answer that question, I'd say, after all this discussion that we've had, I think I want to stay out of the quarreling daughters or whatever. I don't want to be involved with all that conflict. As much as I like goats, I don't think Qohor sounds like a nice place. Lorath sounds like a bunch of idiots. Norvos, I mean, I would go there, but Patrick's already there, so there's no way in hell I'm living in the same city as Patrick.
Come on, man.
Braavos is okay, but I think, you know what? I think I'm going to go with Pentos because I'm not a really big fan of the rain. So
And you're
just
really
so
boring?
No, you know what? Pentos sounds like it's a good time.
No.
I get a house just like Register Illyrio.
Yeah,
And
I
a
mean,
really
If
boring
you're rich,
house.
If you're
Pentos
rich, anywhere is fine.
Pentos would be pretty good.
Pentos seems like a nice, stable, like chill place to live. That's
Boring suburban
it's
house.
close to King's Landing, so you can just take the ferry over to King's Landing if you want. You don't have to worry about the Dothraki and all that shit. I think I'd have to go with that if I really put myself in that situation.
Sounds really horrible. Really you're living in a suburban life.
Well, they may not have
fine.
those
Gated
those
community,
underworld-
and
You're in
Why
a
picket fence?
theocracy, right? I mean, that's kind of sucks.
Is Pentos a theocracy?
No, Norvos isn't it?
Right.
yes.
yeah, I don't
know
mind.
what's going to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, I would
Deciding
prefer.
every
I
day
don't-
whether you're going to live with that. Dan, did you say one?
Oh, I'm sticking with Braavos. I live in Michigan, and I was just complaining that we don't have any snow yet, so the weather doesn't bother me.
You're complaining
no,
that you don't have snow yet?
Yeah, I like snow.
All right.
So next section is Beyond the Free Cities. The little introduction, the only thing I noted was that there are many sort of blank spots in Essos where no commerce is made and sort of nothing really is known of the people there. And there were a few sort of notable exceptions to the compendium, like Slaver's Bay, Lazarine and Karth. There's not really anything mentioned about them. Any thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, I thought that was a bit strange. Like,
Yeah.
Something like Karth, just out of curiosity, I want to know more. But with something like Slaver's Bay, I really want to know
Less.
with the Giscari. No, I want to know more because I want to know whether slavery defines them when they were a Giscari culture or if it's a response to now that slavery is all they've got. Yeah, that was my main quibble.
I mean, I think we know a lot about Slaver's Bay and Karth just from Danny's experiences, but it would have been cool to learn a bit more about maybe the history, because Danny's...
There's some history of not Karth as a city, but the Kothi. Like
we do, yeah.
That they talk about that in the grassland section.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right.
How they lost all the wars.
Yeah. They're not great. It was, but they but they're very important. So I was surprised that they weren't included. But that's all right. I guess they had to stop somewhere. They couldn't include everything. But that concludes the first installment of our discussion on the lands beyond the Sunset Kingdoms. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll be delving into Sotheros, the Dothraki grasslands, Shivering Seas. Might even have to have a part 3 if we talk that much about it. But if you'd like to join us for that episode or leave any comments or questions you'd like us to address, please let us know on the forum threads. I'd like to thank Thomas.
Well, thank you, Duncan.
Patrick.
Thank you.
Dan.
Appreciate the hosting job.
And Augustine.
Thank you. I can see why all the women of Vassals of Kingsgrave are all smitten with your. Such a pleasure.
Yeah. Okay. And Mike.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure.
All right. This has been the Vassals of Kingsgrave. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Come back, Bina.
Hey, what's up? How's everyone
Yeah, the
going?
wind tunnel just got here.
Ah, shit, do I sound like crap?
Do you have a microphone, Michael?
I do, but it's not...
Because I remember I think it was the Looking podcast.
Yeah, I was
It was
having a lot of
like-
trouble.
Just rainfall.
Yeah, look, if I sound like shit, I'll just drop out.
No, I think it sounds okay now.
So this was the 6 of us.
Yeah, there's a few other people who were interested, but they didn't really post again, so I wasn't sure. But yeah, I figured we could do it in 2 parts, if that's okay with you guys. It's just like, looking at my notes, it's just ridiculous. I don't think we're going to get it all done in like 5 hours, so I don't know.
Well, okay.
Well, that's all right. We can do two podcasts instead of 1.
See where we get to, I
okay.
guess.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool.
So
Is
how
that-
come no one else added his show notes except me and Duncan?
I added to the
What?
show notes.
Yeah,
did
I was in
well.
there.
I didn't see anyone except me and Duncan.
I put one thing in there.
A few things.
So one
Most,
person at the end wants to know the dirt on Soccercast 2. I don't know who did that though.
Who wrote that?
That was me.
It's not really all that much. It's not really all that interesting, to be honest with you. It's just a confluence of a few different factors that all led to that episode not being released.
I put in a wyvern joke and a bunch of stuff about Mongols.
And I think, Michael, you wanted to talk a bit about maybe Orientalism in the book? But,
Yeah, I was just, sort of. I just wanted to see if anyone thought when they were reading the initial novels that they got Orientalism. I didn't, but
I
I
sort
would
of
say...
I sort of agree, like, just the way, UT is depicted as this exotic kind of cradle of civilization and all that. But yeah,
Well, I
maybe...
mean, look, what do you mean by Orientalism exactly?
I think that's a
Yeah.
whole podcast in and of itself.
well,
It's-
yeah, I could spend hours talking about that. That's my main subject at college. So I study Japanese. So
I guess my question is.
Orientalism is.
I guess my question is, I was under the impression that the whole point was to purposely put in Orientalism because that's the
Sure.
way historically the West viewed the East, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So
That's
that's-
that's what I got.
Sure.
So I would just say this is probably worthy of the pod. I don't know, are we podcasting yet or not?
No, No, I was just...
Yeah, because I think the discussion there is probably worthy of the podcast myself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
What,
instead of
the whole subject of putting Orientalism into the story,
yes,
or the narrative.
Well,
Okay.
that might be something too that would be better at the end.
Yeah,
after
that's what
we
I
sort
thought.
of go through all the.
Yeah, like
you
a
know.
final
Yeah,
recap discussion.
I think we should have like a general themes at the end.
Yeah.
Something
Definitely.
like the oily stones and other ones and the Orientalism, maybe.
All those oily stones. They're like everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. What's up with that?
Fish
But yeah.
people.
So good.
yeah, it's Cthulhu, I think. Right?
Fish oil, yeah.
It's just Cthulhu.
True detective.
Yeah. Well, we got Carcosa, but I guess we can do that at the end. But who else is recording?
I'm recording.
I turned mine on. I've never actually used the program before, but I think it's working.
Yeah, mine's
Yeah,
working.
I re-downloaded it today. I've never actually successfully recorded anything, but I will make sure I try at least.
It says here in my, at least, it's recording, so I hope that's correct.
Okay, that's all right. As long as we've got a couple of backups going.
Mm.
Okay, cool. Shall we start?
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, Augustine, we're getting some.
So I guess I found it interesting. I guess a few things here. I first of all, with the Jacob Hagar speech. Oops.
Okay. Augustine?
Yeah, Augustine.
Yes, you are cutting out.
Is there a microphone touching something?
Well,
Okay now.
Oh, it's an avalanche.
no.
You shaving
Wow.
like Chase?
No.
With a chainsaw?
It's...
So Thomas, are you of Scandinavian descent then? If you're from Michigan?
No. I'm in Minnesota, but I'm not from here originally. I'm
Okay.
Maybe related.
I was just... Yeah, of course we are. Everyone is related, really, except for you. We're not related with you. No, that's actually not even joking. It's said that everyone who are Caucasian originate from Europe are all related back
I didn't
to
know
about.
Nazi cast just returned.
No,
back.
but it's not even
Keep your Third Reich philosophies off. Vassals.
Well, you're supposed to be related to Genghis Khan, so apparently.
Genghis Khan?
Not by choice, man.
He raped so many.
No, we're supposed to be related to Charlemagne or Karl the Great, as he's also called.
Okay.
So
Duncan,
that's apparent.
What are
Give this
we
episode.
talking
Bring
about?
it home. Oh, Patrick started getting.
I stepped away for a second, and it's like racist cast. Anyway,
Yeah.
let's get back to
Patrick
the world at
started
hand, the imaginary world. And now, for a brief history of the Valerian Freehold.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From Slaver's Bay, well, to the last seedy island. From the Qohor to the great grass sea. I tell you, this land was made for you and me. As I went walking down that turn of a demon's road, I saw above me, oh, that endless dragon horde. Now I saw below me unconquered terrain, and I said, this land was made for the Valyrian expansion. for you